The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised.
This is not a test. This is reality.
It's the weekend, and we are going beyond the strange with host Dave Cruz on Spaced Out Saturday Nights.
Dave's the killer! Yeah! Dave's the killer! Dave's a mess.
When the clocks, they never stop, they barricade my face.
You can follow Dave on Twitter at StrangeDave70. Hit him up on Skype, Strange Days 2015. And you can follow Dave on our website, spacedoutradio.com.
Things are gray. I push until I break. I feel them start to scrape. The core of all I am is chiseling away. And every speck of life is gonna rot away in time. We turn to mud or turn to stone, it's a grand design. A maze of petrified hearts and I'm lost inside. We all self-destruct, love is to deny. And that is life.
The probability is low, but the discoveries of the Kepler mission suggest that there are billions of habitable planets in our galaxy alone. And there are at least 100 billion galaxies in the visible universe. So it seems likely that there are others out there.
Now, get your tinfoil hats on tight as Spaced Out Saturday with Dave Cruz begins right now.
You're here to turn me inside out and then turn me away. For all my life I choke on clouds of savior smoke until my blood and soul was burning away. And every speck of life is gonna rot away in time. Return to mud or turn to stone, it's a grand design. A maze of petrified hearts and I'm lost inside. We all self-destruct to love is to deny.
Hola, everyone. Welcome to Spaced Out Saturday Night. I am your host, Dave Cruz. Nice to be here with y'all tonight. It is Saturday, November 4th, on the west side, of course. Sunday, November 5th, if you're on the East Coast. We are live from the Napa Valley wine country, just outside the mystical Sonoma Mountains. Let's welcome in everyone listening on our terrestrial stations, WQEE 99 Rock the Key in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. You can listen to us live on spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker.com, KTLK, TheFringe.fm, and Renegade Talk Radio. Like our music, then rock with us to Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy. Bumblefoot is the official sound of the mighty SOR. Also, you can check us out on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Twitter, you can follow me at StrangeDave70 or follow me on Facebook under Dave Cruz. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show, and tune in with us on TuneIn Radio. Download our shows from iTunes, and we are also on Radio Guide FM, TalkStream Live, and on Stitcher. And of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. And if you go to patreon.com right now, for as low as $1 a month, you can become a patron of Spaced Out Radio. If you want to take part in the show, please sign in to one of our chat rooms on our website at Spreaker.com, the UPRN chat room, and on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club Facebook page. And if you're on Twitter, in the Twitterverse, just go to hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and I'll get your questions in there as well as your comments. If you head over to our website for just $5 a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. And as of right now, you can go to the Spaced Out Radio store, pick up a t-shirt, posters, or an SOR sticker. We have the Encounter online. That deals with everything paranormal, courtesy of our editors, Eric Markham and Everett Thiemer. You could check out Dave Scott's latest blog there as well. And if you've had an experience you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Tim Doyle from UFO Seekers and Leslie Mitchell Clark's Contact TV also have some great video viewing as well. Hope you all had a great Halloween. This past Tuesday, finally got to see one of our favorite houses in the neighborhood. You know, every year, this house is amazing. And I was a little worried at first because it didn't really feel like Halloween, especially with all the catastrophes that we've been having lately with the hurricanes and the shootings and the fires up here in Northern California and in SoCal. I mean, California was just on fire for a minute. There are a lot of distractions, if you will. I mean, it just didn't seem like the holidays, you know. Halloween usually kicks off the holidays season for me. It's probably one of my favorite holidays. I like to think of it as a holiday. And for a while there, it didn't feel like it, but it came around. We did our pumpkins. You know, we went out for a little while. Kids went out trick-or-treating, got candy. It was all good. And I did get a video of that house that I'm talking about. It's on my Dave Cruz Facebook page. So if y'all get a chance, go check it out. I want to quickly mention also that our heart goes out to those who lost their loved ones during a senseless automobile massacre. 8 people were killed and more than a dozen were injured in New York after a man ran his truck through a crowd of people just 4 days ago. The Guardian reports after smashing into a school bus, injuring 2 adults, 2 children, 29-year-old suspect exited the truck displaying imitation firearms. Witnesses have said the suspect was shouting Allah Akbar, of course, Arabic for God is great, before he was shot by the police. According to New York Police Department, the suspect was arrested and he had a paintball gun and a pellet gun recovered from the scene. Suspect underwent surgery and was in critical condition, but was expected to survive. Officials weren't authorized to discuss the investigation and spoke on the condition of anonymity. Identified the attacker as 29-year-old Sayfulo Saipov, an Uzbek citizen who came to the U.S. legally in 2010. He's in Florida. He had a Florida driving license, but he may have been living in New Jersey. anyways, thoughts and prayers are with those people in Manhattan that happened to them. So again, I just wanted to bring that up real quick because that really got to me. Anyways, once again, let's go ahead and let's get back to our paranormal show, and we have a great one for you tonight. Alex Mistretta is one of the few full-time professional investigators in the field. He is the former member of Big Cats in Britain. He's also former MUFON Los Angeles Director of Investigations, founder of Phenomena Research, and co-founder of the UFO and Paranormal Research Society of Los Angeles. Following his studies in anthropology and psychology at the University of Illinois, Chicago, Alex has devoted his life to research into the paranormal, UFOs, hidden history, and cryptozoology. Described as part Mulder and part Indiana Jones, Alex has also been featured on several television shows, including UFO Files and Legend Hunters. Everyone, please help me welcome for the first time on Spaced Out Radio that I know of, Mr. Alex Mistretta. Alex, welcome to the show, and thanks for being on.
No, thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Me too, man. I mean, it's it's something that we both just love to do. Just get together and talk about the paranormal and everything about it, man. Because this is like your bio says. You're described as part Mulder and part Indiana Jones. But at the same time,
yeah.
I think you're like the most intense person I've ever seen. It's like you're ready to just kick someone's ass. It's all good. Anyways, man, welcome to the show. I'm really glad that you're here, and we got a lot to cover, but we got plenty of time to do so, and it's gonna be great. And I just want to welcome everyone out there on Facebook that's at the SOR Space Travelers page and at the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Twitter, again, you guys, I'll get to your questions. Please put them in caps. Deb's looking for them in the Spreaker chat as well. Welcome to everyone there as well. You guys are in for a treat. So let's do a little bit of history. Where did you grow up, Alex?
I was born in France and lived in the suburbs of Paris and Monaco when I was a kid. I moved to Los Angeles when I was 9, and I pretty much grew up here until I went to a high school in Chicago. And took a couple years between high school and college. I played volleyball in the Midwest Professional Tour, a beach tour, and then stayed in Chicago for college. And then after that, I came back to Los Angeles because it was too cold in Chicago. So I consider myself, an LA boy.
Right on. That's cool. And when I got to bring up the book because I can't believe how young you were when you first started. Did the paranormal always follow you?
I wouldn't say it always followed me, but since I was like a little kid, I've always been interested in it. I would go and ask. I'd go to the bookstore and ask for books on like ghosts or UFOs or the Yeti or whatever. Ever since I can remember. I mean, I don't know what it stemmed from originally, what started it, but as far as I can remember, from earliest age, I've been like obsessed with this stuff.
Do you remember the shows back in the 70s, like That's Incredible, In Search Of, Well,
especially In Search Of, because it was my first introduction to like the Patterson film for Bigfoot, and I was a Star Trek fan as a little kid, still am in fact. And having Spock talk about the Yeti or UFOs or whatever, for me, it was just like the greatest thing ever.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I want to say I like Star Trek. I watch Star Trek. I'm not a Trekkie per se,
yeah.
but I do love following the newer series. For me, it was like Enterprise was pretty cool.
Yeah.
The Discover, that's the new one, right?
I'm not sure it's a new one. It's on CBS Access, which I don't have, so I haven't been watching it. So
Okay.
yeah, something like that. So.
No, I know someone's going to pipe up here pretty soon in the Spreaker chat, so it's all good about. They'll definitely bring it up. But yeah, I mean, sci-fi has always been part of my life as well, and I'm pretty sure that kind of got you started in investigations, like with UFOs as well. Mainly with you, it's paranormal, though, right? I mean, like parapsychology, that kind of thing.
Honestly, it's kind of everything. I think UFOs was sort of my first big interest. I had a comic book when I was a kid. I think my grandmother bought it for me when I was visiting her in the south of France. It was this comic, and he had all the histories of all the UFO sightings up to that, I get whatever it was, 1976, maybe that was. I was very little. And so it had, all the Villas Boas case in Brazil. It had a lot of the close encounter cases, and I remember reading on the cover that it was like real life stories, and I like even already at age 6 or 7 or whatever, it just kind of like blew my mind, and I was kind of hooked from that time on. I mean,
sweet. Yeah, I mean, I know it's going to sound weird, but okay, well, let me stop there, because my family's always talked about things that were odd and bizarre, and a lot of times it was either a cryptid that you might know about. It's the owl man, but in Spanish we call him the lechuza.
Yeah.
And so I heard a lot about that because my family is from Mexico, and there's a lot of legends and that kind of stuff there. And one of this other stories that I heard was like these dolls that would actually walk around by themselves
on the island.
Not Los Islas de los the dolls. That one. But it was actually in our family that these dolls would be haunted in a house, and they would walk around at night, kind of like what's that one doll?
Annabelle.
Oh no, Annabelle's another one. Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. Is there's so many stories. This stuff is just crazy. I mean, you could probably make it up, but I don't think it's. I think it's real. For most things, especially when I start hearing my family talk about it. But
yeah.
But you started basically when you were 12, right? With the paranormal.
My first investigation, ghost investigation, is when I was 12 years old. So my first experience was when I was 10. I had a UFO sighting at age 10. But my first, bona fide investigation was in London. In fact, we had moved to London for 6 months in 1982. And that was my very first.
Now, when you were in Europe, did you do just mainly, paranormal investigations? Or, I mean, did you do the normal kid stuff, like, hang out with friends and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I went to school and all that. I even, since I was in London, I even played soccer. I was a goalie on the team at school, tried some rugby. And, but yeah, I was always into sports. Like I actually I had Olympic aspirations once upon a time. So the only, I was always sports, and the paranormal was always kind of like my two things.
Sweet. And that's funny. I'm already getting these questions, and they're asking me if I've ever been to the Island of the Haunted Dolls. And no, I haven't. I'd love to check it out. One of these days, I'm hoping to be able to do that kind of investigation like you've been doing. So, but right now the research is cool. I'll do the research and maybe get out there in the field with you and Rick one of these days.
Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, man.
I always wanted to go there.
That'd be pretty awesome.
Yep.
But so you started in London with your first investigation, and what was that investigation about? If you don't mind telling that a little bit about that to the listeners.
Well, let me give you a little bit of a background on it. That's kind of what got me excited about investigating then. So my stepdad was in London to record an album, and they had this famous recording studio. I forgot what it's called, but the place was kind of haunted. And one night I was there talking to the drummer, He was like teaching me percussions and all that, and he was saying that when he came in that morning, like all the speakers and stuff were stacked up, you know, kind of like in Poltergeist, on top of one another.
Right.
You know, so that got me pretty excited. And then we rented a house at that time, which was actually haunted. We used to hear footsteps upstairs, which was the last floor. Nobody slept there. I think it was 3 floors, if I remember correctly. My mom and stepdad at the time slept on the first floor. I slept on the second with my brother. And upstairs, which was just like a bunch of empty rooms, and that's where we hear the footsteps at night. And so we were in central London. And I remember going upstairs one night, and I could see footprints on the carpet, literally walking away from me, just down the hallway. And so from then on, I started, you know, sleeping by the stairway every night, waiting for something to happen, which not a whole lot, you know, happened aside from more footprints and that sort of thing. I heard them coming down the stairs one time, but they stopped before they got to me. And the funny thing is I used to carry a knife with me, kind of like Zach Baggins, you know, except that I was 12 and he's an adult. But, yeah, so anyway, I was already in that mind frame. And right around the corner was a place called Berkeley Square, which is a famous haunted house. Now, it's like by the time we moved there, it was a bookstore. The first floor and the second floor were bookstores, and the top floors were off limits to people. So a little background on it was called The Horror of Berkeley Square. It's a famous case. And it's one of those where it's hard to separate, like, kind of fact from fiction. I don't know what really happened and what's urban legend and all that. But the stories behind the place was that in 1800s, like a woman jumped out of the window, committed suicide because she was being abused by her uncle. And then somebody else moved in, Mr. Myers, in late 1800s, I believe. He supposedly went insane. And so the story started getting around that this place was heavily haunted and weird things started happening. And this gentleman by the name of Robert Warboys, who thought the whole story was ridiculous, decided to sleep upstairs in one of the rooms. But he didn't believe in it, but he still carried his pistol with him. And there was a guard downstairs, and at some point in the night, the guard heard the pistol go off. And, you know, he ran upstairs, and Mr. Warboys was found dead. And then a few years later, another guy tried the same story, this time with a shotgun. He was alive, but he said he saw an apparition and shot at the wall, and it said he went right through the apparition. And then as the years went on, apparently there's stories of people dying up there of fright. And like I said, you know, I can't verify. I don't know what's true and what's not. But nonetheless, this was like right around the corner for where we lived. So one day I decided that, you know, I get my backpack on, like a notebook and stuff and pen, and, you know, I was 12, and I'm like, I'm going to go up there and investigate. And so I go around the corner. At the time, I didn't know what kind of building it was. I didn't know it was a bookstore, which is a good thing it was, and I could kind of get in. So, you know, and I knew all the good stuff was on the 3rd and 4th floor. And then, but it was off limits. So what I did is that, you know, I kind of went downstairs. I had a camera with me. I kind of took some pictures, you know, hang out, kind of like I was pretending to look at books. And then kind of like went up the stairs when nobody was looking. And so there's nobody up there. It was very dark. And I started taking pictures. And I probably took a total between, what's a roll of film? I don't remember, like 32 pictures maybe, if I remember correctly. 35 millimeter roll. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I used an entire roll, and I would say 75% of the pictures were upstairs, and then the rest were all downstairs. And then at some point, I heard some noise upstairs, and I thought maybe it was somebody working there, and I didn't want to get caught, so I left. And then so that was it. But I developed the pictures, and as it turns out, every picture from the bottom floors, which just came out perfect, clear, and the whole deal. But every single picture I took from the top 2 floors, from the stairway on to the hallways and all that, were like veiled, and there's like mist everywhere. And there's one that had like a light on the wall, which could have just been anything. But every single picture was mist and veiled. And obviously, in retrospect, it could have been, maybe it was too dark in there. I didn't know how to take pictures, but nonetheless, from that point on, at age 12, I was, convinced I was due to like paranormal activity, and I was stoked. I was hooked from that point, and that's what started my whole, investigation career.
Were you like grabbing any book you can find on the paranormal so you can kind of, vet all the stuff that you've been coming across and that kind of thing? Like, what, like you said with the pictures, because I remember reading in the Presence, and for the listeners, we will get into the book, in depth in the next hour. But I kind of want to just go over this. You mentioned something about spirits are normally seen around staircases.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's an enormous amount of pictures, in fact, of seeing ghosts, for lack of a better word, come down the staircases and all that. Mm-hmm. And granted, it's kind of like a natural position for you to be in, take pictures facing upwards, the staircase, everybody does it. But I don't know, perhaps it has more meaning than that. Maybe it's a kind of like philosophical transition phase, you going up and down the stairs to another destination type of thing. I mean, it's just that's kind of like a wild guess. I don't have like a real working hypothesis, but I've noticed that a lot of sightings and pictures do take place in staircases.
Interesting. Bob in the Facebook SOR Space Travelers page, he it's kind of a comment, but it could be a question, and asked, why do people think that knives and ammo will harm a spirit? Do you think that they were maybe thinking that it might not be a spirit, that it might just be some kind of psychotic person, maybe?
No, I think honestly, you just feel more secure. It's like it's a crutch, I guess, which is probably the same reason I had a knife when I was 12. I had I used to scoop a knife.
So
yeah, I was 12. Yeah, when you're an adult, you're running around with a knife at a haunted house. You have no excuse. But yeah, I think part of it, I think it's psychological. It makes you feel more secure. I mean, I don't know I think and if I'm out in the woods, whatever, in dangerous places, or I do feel more secure if there's weapons around. I don't ever plan to use them.
Right.
So I think a lot of that's psychological.
Yeah, especially with the cryptids. I'm sure you'd feel a lot more secure. I don't know about Bigfoot, but or Dogman, but maybe you take out a chupacabra or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, but honestly, Bigfoot wants to tear your arms off.
Exactly.
Unless you got a machine gun, there's not much you can do about it.
Not very much, not at all. Yeah, we'll definitely get into Bigfoot in a little bit. And again, referring to your book, so you started at 12, and it just kind of went on from there. Who were some of the people you worked with along the line, Alex?
Up until after college, nobody. It was just me. Mm-hmm. I didn't start working with anybody else until I moved back here to L.A. So first there was this guy named Frank, and then I can't remember his last name. He had a little team up here, and I joined up with him a few times. But the person I've worked the most with is Dr. Barry Taff. We met on through a friend, Jolene, which was public relation. I forgot what her exact title was, but she did PR for MUFON Los Angeles, and she was friends with Barry. She's like, hey, you got to meet this guy. And then we went up to Ojai, and I got a small investigation up there, and I met Barry. And he needed a ride back, and I give him a ride back to my car, and then we got along really well. We had a lot of the same theories, which kind of made sense because I was aware of his work, and a lot of my theories are based kind of on his work. And we became friends, and I spent the next few years investigating most of my cases with Barry. Now, otherwise, everything else was through Steve Murillo at right. MUFON and the UPARs, yeah.
Right. Was Barry the gentleman that had investigated the entity case? Correct.
Yeah. If anybody's ever seen the movie The Entity, one of the main characters based on Barry and his partner. They had UCLA used to have a parapsychology lab, which I was aware of because I lived in Westwood as a kid. So I knew that UCLA had a lab at the time, and I used to go to UCLA a lot for sports, as a child. So, and then so that's how I knew about Barry. And yeah, and then they're the one to investigate the entity case, which obviously is probably the most famous case in the field.
That case that case was fairly old. I mean, I want to say maybe in the late 60s, because the movie came out. Oh, was it the 70s? Because I know the movie came out in the late 70s.
Yeah, I think it was 1982, if I remember correctly.
Oh, okay, so early 80s then.
Yeah, it was definitely in the 80s because the case took place in the 70s. Now, the movie took a lot of liberties, but yeah, it was I'm pretty sure it was 1982.
Yeah, they did.
I have it here somewhere. But
I mean, I know you talked about Barry. You know, he wrote about it, of course, or you know, he definitely talked about it. And the lady seemed more like the original person. You know, I'm sorry, I'm not good about like describing, but the person who had talked about this case, the case was about. It was it like they thought, you guys thought, or Barry thought maybe it was her own projection of her, you know, like maybe, you know, some kind of psionic type thing instead of real ghost spirits activity?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's sort of what kind of created the link between myself and Barry, because I remember reading about the entity case, and you know, in most books up to that point, everything was ghost, and didn't really discuss any of Barry's theories. But I remember reading that, you know, part of the story, the entity was that the girl was getting held down by 3 hands, or 3 litter creatures, right? Invisible, obviously. They're holding her down while she was getting raped or attacked or whatever. But I also realized that she had a lot of issues with 3 of her kids.
Okay.
You know, and she didn't really get along with them, and there a lot of other issues, so it's not really my story to tell. But so I kind of got, you know, and just from that I started thinking, well, what if it's not really a ghost, but it's a projection of her id in some ways that is able to manifest physically, which, as it turns out, that was Barry's theory. He calls them poltergeist agents, where certain individuals, given a particular set of particular environment, are able to take in that outside energy, like electromagnetic energy, for example, and their subconscious is able to use it to create this phenomena. And then, which sort of makes sense, because if you look at a lot of these cases, there's like an onset. It sort of functions like a virus, and then, you know, and then it increases and increases, and it eventually diminishes. And I've also realized, working with Barry, that most of these cases always surround a particular individual, which means it follows that individual around. But you can also catch it for brief periods of time, like a virus, but to diminished degree. So it's not, and again, it doesn't haunt a particular place, because the Doris, the lady and the entity, it followed her wherever she moved. It went with her, and we had like I said, a plethora of cases like that, which is very different from typical haunted cases. And then, in fact, you know, and that's why Beer and I ended up getting along, because he was the one that kind of came up originally with that theory, and it made a lot of sense to me. Which is one of the, in fact, it was one of the reasons I picked psychology as one of my majors, because I wanted to better understand the subconscious and the id, you know, so it would help me in these type of cases.
Around that same time, wasn't like Ingo Swann kind of making waves with what he was doing with like
remote viewing?
Yeah, with remote viewing. Didn't he also do what's that spoon bending thing? What do they call that? You know, you can
like what Uri Geller was doing,
Uri Geller. I'm sorry, yeah, Uri Geller. My bad. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I mean, obviously that was Uri Geller. I think it was a little bit before that, so it was kind of before my time. I'm pretty sure Barry met him, though. I think he knew him. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, Uri Geller's kind of a controversial figure, but yeah, it was around that time. It was a big thing here, and especially in L.A. apparently, the spoon bending parties. Everybody'd get together and bend spoon.
Nice.
Now, I know there's ways to do it where you can kind of fake it, you know, so for what it's worth. But
yeah, I'm just trying to link it to all the things that you know people were doing with their mind. I know that like now we have the show that everyone's watching and talking about, you know, Stranger Things, and you know it's basically to me it relates to like the Montauk, you know, Chronicles, or you know the story of Montauk, where they were doing experiments on the kids. They were using MK Ultra, that kind of thing, where they were using these women to create these psionic type, you know, special kids. They can do things with their mind. So that's what I was trying to link it to, where possibly a lot of this paranormal activity, like, you know, what ghosts can do with levitating, you know, objects and that kind of thing, possibly it's people who are doing it and they don't know they're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one thing like quantum physics has discovered is you know, when you're studying particles, particles get affected by whoever's observing the particles, you know? And I think that translates to the macro world as well. There's a concept in anthropology called voodoo death, right? Let's say you're in a, you know, so-called primitive society, and there's a witch doctor, and he curses you. And you'd be amazed how many cases the person that gets cursed will actually die. Not because the witch doctor has any particular set of powers, but only because the belief system is so strong that a person causes, you know, their own body to shut down. So I think, you know, we're more powerful than we believe. And again, you can never, you know, and when it comes to like hauntings and stuff, I'm a firm believer that you can never separate the phenomena completely from who's observing the phenomena. And there can be kind of synergetic, you know, energy between the two. And I firmly believe you can create the phenomena as well. So what you're observing, you know, it's complicated, right? Because you don't know what you're seeing if it's part of what your subconscious is creating, or, you know, vice versa. So it's more complicated than just running around, you know, looking for dead people.
Yeah, you know, I get that, you know, and I'm just overwhelmed that, you know, the whole time that I've been learning about, you know, ghosts and the paranormal and spirits, that it's quite possible that this also phenomena where, you know, people can actually be doing all this projection type stuff, which would, you know, create a paranormal situation. And, you know, to me that I find that interesting as well. Just, you know, this whole field is just amazing to me, and you know, I can understand why you've been doing it for so long.
Here's the thing that's super interesting, though.
Yeah.
That Barry discovered. He discovered that, now in poltergeist cases, not in regular haunting cases, you know, like I said, that's different. That when a particular individual was kind of like seeming the cause of it, there's a correlation between a lot of these individuals were actually seizure prone. And when they were on their seizure medication, the phenomena would stop. But when they weren't taking it, it would increase. So which led you to believe that, and obviously a lot more studies need to be done, is that whatever part of your brain is responsible for the seizure, and, you know, whatever part of your brain gets turned off by the seizure medication is potentially partly responsible, or is part of the mechanism involved in creating poltergeist phenomena. And I always thought that was fascinating. It's just something that's never really been studied, unfortunately.
That's really cool. And the other thing too is that I didn't realize it until, you know, recently as well, that there is parapsychology studies that people were actually, you know, doing this at universities. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I don't know how many of those are left. Like when I was in high school, I know there's quite a bit more than there is now. I know there's one in Princeton, and I think they had one at Stanford back in the day, because when I was getting recruited by Stanford when I was in high school for volleyball and fencing, and I remember looking it up, and they had a parapsychology lab somewhere. I forget. I don't know if it was associated with Stanford or used to be associated with Stanford. I don't quite recall at this point. But ultimately that closed down. The Pear Lab in Princeton closed down. And, yeah, I don't know how many of them are left. I know there's still one in Scotland, I believe. But it's been, you know, there's a lot of those on the internet, but all of those are, you know, fake, pretty much.
Why do you think
those
closed
it's
down?
hard. Lack of funding.
Lack of funding. It always comes back to money.
Everything always goes back to money, unfortunately, you know. And, I mean, even some of them that used to have labs are a little bit embarrassed by it by now, because they're afraid. UCLA literally deny that they had a parapsychology lab. I mean, it's like, you know, there's newspaper articles written about it, so it's hard for them to completely deny it. But they will, to this day, if you talk to anybody, they'll pretend they never had one, just because they need money, and then, you know, no one wants to be associated with this stuff. It hurts your, you know, your source of funding, unfortunately.
That's interesting, because nowadays you see all these shows. We were talking about this before the show, our show.
Yeah.
But the shows I'm talking about are like on TV, and a lot of them are just like, they just do things so they can, you know, make it more like entertainment. Whereas, you know, people like me and you and Rick and other people who really want to get to the truth. For those of you who know what I'm talking about when I bring up Rick, is our friend Rick Sinnott, who's also an investigator and researcher. I'm going to do my best to get this right. Strange Happenings Investigations Field Team. I think it's called Shift. And and he investigates with his father, and they've been doing it for quite a long time. But we really want to get down to what's true. And unfortunately, when you're looking for the truth, there's no money in it, and like you said, lack of funding. And it's really a shame, because I think, it's so much nicer when you can use science to get down to what's really happening out there.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean you can't make it exciting and fun at the same time, but yeah, it's tough today, because if you want to be able to investigate, you need television money, essentially. That's what it's down to. But if you're going to get television money, it's like, basically, it's like, hey, you got to go hang out with Harvey Weinstein, So that's never a good thing. You have to compromises, But, I remember I was in a meeting one time. This guy was for a show. I forgot what cable network it was. So I went and met the guy, and so I walk into the office, and the guy's like literally like just completely high on cocaine. He's like, yeah, we got this great show. Want you to lead it? He's like, here's what I want. I want like to be like Scooby-Doo. You guys got to run around and stuff. And we're looking at him like, yeah, I might not be your guy, I don't know if they're paying a little bit more, but
that's
that's what they want. So, and again, I don't know. I still think you can still do a fun show on television. It's not, but we're in this kind of like either or zeitgeist right now, just in society in general. It's like, so either you do something real and it's considered and it's boring and it's done like like the Smithsonian Channel, which isn't really the most exciting, to be honest with you,
mm-hmm. Or
it's the complete opposite. You get people running around, falling, getting hit by air. So
getting hit by air. That's funny.
Light reflection.
What's the what's the show that you were talking about on Facebook about the crappy actor is back or something like that?
Oh, it's this video that came out recently. I guess it's a show in the UK. It's supposedly an investigator and his wife, and the story was that she was possessed by, I think it was a child or something that was inside a doll that she was holding. It was very weird, and the guy kind of walks up to her, and he's obviously pretending to get like thrown backwards.
Oh, so
and it was that. It was like, well, that's a whole other issue. But yeah, it was like, he had two videos. There, one where he walks up to her and he gets thrown backwards. Where obviously you can kind of see him like pushing off with his leg, and the other one, like this door opens by itself and he completely freaks out because I don't know, the door opened by itself. But yeah, the sort of thing that unfortunately are very popular right now.
Yeah, it's interesting.
He's a terrible actor, by the way.
He's a crappy actor. I love that. That was pretty funny. The crappy actor's back. But it sucks because those shows, they really make this a bad. They give it a bad name. They give investigating and researching a bad name, and unfortunately, that's what people think when they hear researching and investigating. They don't realize there's people out there who are really doing this in real life, not on TV, and it's just amazing to me. But I'm not trying to spend the whole night just bagging on people and stuff, but I just want people to understand that there's people out there like you who do this real and they get real results, and sometimes they don't. Let me ask you this: how many times have you gone out on investigation and you actually found nothing?
A lot of the times. Yeah, most of the time it's just you. If you're investigating ghosts, it's you sitting in a house in the dark, or not in the dark. You're looking for UFOs, it's you sitting out in the desert in the cold. You're looking for Bigfoot, it's you sitting out in the woods looking at trees. The majority of the time you don't see anything because you have to be very patient, which I realize that's a problem from a television standpoint. I think there's ways to get around it. Like, I've been incredibly fortunate. In fact, that I've seen so many things, I think, that I've been very, very lucky in a lot of ways. I think I have good instinct, but, I've been very fortunate. But, yeah, most of the time it's just, it's hours and hours of just waiting.
Yeah, I've heard that, some of those shows that are on TV, they can take up to weeks, and only get like so much footage and so much, whatever to use for a 1 hour show. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's part of the deal, but I think there's ways to get around that to make it exciting, but no one's really has been doing it. But
yeah, I believe you, man. I mean, it's just, you see a lot more good stuff, I think, in my opinion, on YouTube, and some of that stuff is fake too. I'm not, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, everything on YouTube is real. Believe me, I'm not saying that, especially when it comes to ufology. But I think you can find stuff on YouTube that people do real research and real investigations, and a lot of times you'll find that they're finding real stuff. And,
well, I'll tell you,
go ahead. Please.
I guarantee you can get results and you can get stuff on film if you pick the right places at the right time. I mean, the idea is you have to pick places that have a consistent amount of activity, but you can also pick places that are kind of have their own personality, that are like spectacular, which kind of helps create atmosphere if you're going to have a show, But I mean, there's certain places that had a lot more activity than people think, but you have to travel. Some of them are overseas. You have to spend a little bit more money. I think it's worth it in the long run, but the problem is, there's a lot of short-term thinking about, just instant gratification, that people want something right here and now. And honestly, if you look at it from a production standpoint, a lot of these producers aren't researchers. They don't care. It's just all about the ratings and getting these shows done. So it's a lot easier to just, film something down the street and have actors pretend than, spend money and go to, I don't know, Mongolia because there's a great paranormal spot there,
Mm-hmm.
As great as it would look on TV. So that's part of the problem. And I get it on certain, on a certain level, but it's kind of like that small time thinking that drives me insane.
So a lot of this happens with paranormal, mainly like, ghosts and spirits and stuff like that, supernatural stuff. We're also seeing it with, the cryptozoology field, unfortunately, with, killing Bigfoot and stupid stuff like that. Idiots. And, I hate to say it, but, we kind of started seeing this with ufology, which, to me is so uncool, especially with some of the stuff that they're talking about today with, all these weird space, whatchamacallit, I want to say space cadet, but like secret space programs and stuff like that. I'm not saying that there isn't one, but, the way that, that they're making it sound, it just drives me nuts, because one of the things I know that Rick likes to say, and, you like to say, is, extraordinary claims requires extraordinary, evidence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think ufology in that sense is the most frustrating, because to me you're dealing with such an important subject. Because assuming that it's true, and I believe that it is, you're dealing with the most important subject in the history of mankind. You're dealing with a subject that's probably been here since the very beginning. Something that affects world politics, it affects economics, it affects everything. And to be treated, like a circus sideshow is, I don't know, to me it's almost criminal, Yeah,
it's too bad. I mean, even... Look, believe me, I get excited when I go to conferences and, a lot of these places that, they have speakers and that sort of thing. I think it's great, and you get together, you talk to a lot of people that, you meet for the first time, and, it's pretty awesome, especially like Contact in the Desert. And then you find out that, some of it is just not what you think. It's people.
What's interesting is,
No, go ahead, please.
Like I was at Contact in the Desert. I was speaking at Contact in the Desert this past year,
Mm-hmm.
and I realized that part of the problem is ufology has become very insular, where now it's all about validation within your group. It's all about within the believers, about making each other, feel better, already being happy, and we know what the truth is. Other people doesn't matter. It's like, but the reality of it is, UFO research or ufology doesn't belong to us. It's not because we're not better or more advanced because we know that there's something to it. We just happen to be more fortunate that we've been around the phenomena or stumbled across it, or some of us had experiences or whatever. So we're luckier than people that don't believe in it or don't know anything about it. And it's, I don't like this, like, it belongs to us and who cares about everybody else, and every subject is geared towards people that already believe. I think it's wrong. I think we should focus more on expanding to, kind of like the outside world, so to speak. I think it's too important for people not to hear about it, not to know about it, and that's what really bothers me. It's like, remember, like in Indiana Jones, he's always like, he wants to like show discoveries to the world. He always like, it belongs to the world. This belongs in the museum.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think that philosophy is valid for ufology. It doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the world, And I don't like this attitude lately that, it's just, if you're not in the group, who cares?
Yeah, that I agree with you 100%. That is so wrong. But they got mavericks like you to help bring out the bust the mold, if you will, or break the chain. So I'm really glad that I'm able to talk to you, and we've acquired a friendship over the last couple of years. So with that said, we do have a break coming up in a couple of minutes, but before that, I want to just let everyone know that in the next hour, we're definitely going to go over a lot of research that Alex has done, and it's a lot of it is in his book, The Presence. It's, man, trust me, you guys don't want to miss the second hour or the last hour. Believe me, we're going to cover quite a bit. How long did it take you to write the book?
It took me about a year. But some of it was already written. Part of it, there's a couple sections where actually I wrote their college studies, like the whole zombie section. Believe it or not, it was actually an independent study I did for the Anthropology department. So some of the stuff was already out there, but for the most part, it took me about a year.
You want to talk, I am going to just talk a little bit about it before the break, but there's so much that you put into this book. And again, I've talked about this before when we talked on my show, but it really seems like this is such a good book. You can use it as a reference book, and I'm really glad that you kind of wrote it that way. But at the same time, you talk about some of the stories, like your experiences when you were 12.
Yeah.
What's one of your favorite parts of the book?
For me, it's the Mokere Membe, the so-called dinosaur of the Congo,
mm-hmm.
Because that's sort of my favorite subject. And I spent 2 years trying to get an expedition together, which included me staying 2 months in Paris waiting to leave, which we never ended up leaving. So it was a lot. Since I never got to go to the Congo on that expedition to look for Mokele Membe, just be able at least to get it out there in writing was pretty cathartic for me,
When did you first heard about Mokele Membe?
Believe it or not, there's a stupid movie back in the 80s called Baby with William Katz,
that.
The greatest American, the greatest American hero.
Yeah.
So it was about somebody finding what back then what they thought was a Brontosaurus, which as it turns out was in a species that didn't actually exist. It was two species kind of put together. But anyway, even though that's been kind of revived since then, but that's the whole other story. So anyway, this movie was about them finding a lost Brontosaurus in the Congo, and this was based on Mokele Membe. And at the time, I had no idea what Mokele Membe was. So skip a few years later, and then so I'm in Chicago, and there's a professor at the University of Chicago, which is about 10 miles from where I went to school, and he had an expedition. This professor, had an expedition in the Congo to look for Mokele Membe, and he wrote a book about it. And I saw the book, and then it kind of reminded me of the movie. And so that's why I get all excited about the book. I'm like, hey, it's like that movie I saw. And I read the book, and then that's when I got into the whole Mokele Membe thing. And then I realized that, looking back, that a researcher by the name of Bernard Oerlemans, who was a Belgian gentleman, he wrote in French. Luckily, I speak French, so I was able to go back, and he wrote a book about it, or a large section of his book was on Mokele Membe. And this was back in college, so, late 80s, early 90s. When I really got into it.
Awesome. I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and stop there. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk some more Mokele Mbembe and everything else. This is Spaced Out Radio Saturdays. I am your host, Dave Cruz. We're speaking with Alex Mistretta. Don't go away. We'll be right back right after this.
We're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over the Spaced Out Radio night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Had a run-in with ghosts, maybe Bigfoot, or seen lights in the sky? Hi, I'm Mike Schmidt from the SOR Sightlines. I'm here to investigate your sighting. Head to spacedoutradio.com and fill out a report on the Sightlines. All your information is 100% confidential, and I will help you figure out what you've been seeing. File your report and let's find out the answers together.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience, Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest, from Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Looking for nighttime adventure? Old school radio that delves into everything out of the norm? Then check us out at Spaced Out Radio. This is Dave Scott. Every Monday through Friday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we're going to take you on a wild ride ranging from conspiracies to true crime and every ghost, alien, and Sasquatch story in between. We're always live, and we're always interactive with you. So join us at spacedoutradio.com, where together, we own the night.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guests and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Cruz and SOR.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to Spaced Out Saturday Nights with me, Dave Cruz. Tomorrow night, Elizabeth Anglin has Psychic Sundays on Spaced Out Sundays Cosmic Passport, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. You can also listen to me, Dave Cruz, as I host Beyond the Strange Radio Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Go to spacedoutradio.com/paranormal and click on Beyond the Strange button for links and info to the show. We want to welcome back everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are also live on the United Public Radio on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are live on TalkStream Live, iHeartRadio, and KTLK, The Fringe.fm as well. Find us on TuneIn and iTunes for downloads. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. Head on over there to the website for some great features from videos from UFO seekers and Contact TV. Shop at our store, pick up some t-shirts, posters, and stickers. And don't forget to rock out to our resident guitar god, Ron Bumblefoot Thal, who is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. Once again, I'd like to thank our guest for being with us tonight, Mr. Alex Mistretta. Alex, thank you very much for being on the show. I greatly appreciate it, and so does the Space Travelers as well. This has been an awesome and quick first hour.
Yeah, it goes by a lot quicker than you think.
It does. And for those of you who are jabbing me in the Facebook Space Travelers, Bob, Dale, no, I'm sorry. I apologize to everyone, and especially to you, Alex. I guess I didn't say the whole name of your book is called The Presence, An Exploration into the Paranormal, which you can find on Amazon.com. Is that correct?
That's correct, yep.
So go there and check it out. Pick up the book. I'm telling you, you're going to love it, especially after we talk about it. But again, Alex, I don't want to give away too much because I know there's lots of material to cover tonight, and we'll definitely try to get to most of it. But one of the things I guess the guys in Facebook were dabbing me about was they mentioned that you were talking about, you wanted to talk a little bit about your time in MUFON.
Okay.
So let's cover that really quick before we move on to the presents.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I joined MUFON after, I can't even remember what year it was. It was at least 15 years ago. And I approached them, I wanted to become an investigator. And they kind of ignored me in the beginning, and then eventually when Steve Murillo took over, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to MUFON Los Angeles. I became an investigator, and then Bill Casey, which was like an excellent investigator, a really nice guy, was kind of the director of investigations at the time, and he retired. And then he asked me if I would take over for him about, I don't know, maybe about a year after I started. And then I spent pretty much until maybe 4 years ago, I spent at least over 10 years as the director of investigations, and until MUFON LA kind of disbanded for a bit.
What does that cover as far as being the director? Do you oversee other people involved, other sub-directors,
yeah,
or that kind of thing?
Well, theoretically, all the cases that get all the sightings that get reported to MUFON within a particular area, so in this case, all of Los Angeles, and which included, in fact, up to I did cases up to 60 miles away in Palmdale and Lancaster. So they would come to me, and then I would either assign him to other investigators, which we didn't have. The first 10 years was basically just me. The last couple years, Steve got a lot more involved in investigations, only because we got by far the most amount of sightings from any MUFON chapter.
Right.
He got to a point where it was getting absolutely crazy. I was spending so much time on investigations. But, so what it turns out, I'm the one that kind of, theoretically decides what's worth investigating, and I fill out the reports and that whole deal, then send it into MUFON. And if there's any new investigators, which we had 3 towards the end, unfortunately, 3 excellent potential investigators, and it was my job to kind of train them. But for the most part, it was just me investigating.
What were some of the most standout in cases that you can remember?
The one in probably all the best cases I had were along the Santa Monica coast, from Santa Monica to Malibu. We had just a plethora of good sightings over the water, objects coming out of the water, heading towards the canyons. I even had one where it was this gentleman calls me up. He's like, I filmed a bunch of objects over Santa Monica Bay. Would you come and check it out? I'm like, absolutely. So I go over to his house, and at first, I get these calls all the time. So I always try to meet with somebody. I don't like to do things by phone, because when you go to someone's house or where they have their sighting, first of all, you can kind of profile the individual. You can look around the apartment or his house and kind of see what kind of books he has, what he's interested in. That sometimes that helps you in terms of determining whether this is a real sighting or not. So anyway, I'm meeting with this guy, and nothing. It all seemed pretty legit. And he's like, I got this film. Let me show it to you. And what it was initially was it was about 5-6 lights that were flying in formation, or 2 o'clock in the morning, kind of above the water. And a red light in the background kind of zigzagging back and forth and all that. And it was interesting. It was obviously, there were helicopters, there were planes and all that. But I'm like, well, it's just one video. I've seen a few of these. And he's like, well, there's actually more to it. As it turns out, it was people from the apartment building that had seen the same thing. I talked to one girl next door. She said she'd seen something up to 50 objects in formation one night flying over the bay, heading towards Malibu. And he's like, but that's not the interesting part. He's like, the day after I had my sighting, I get a knock at the door. And these two guys come by, and they say they work for the city. He's like, and it was really weird because I didn't get the urge to ask him or show him, or to ask him for identification. I just felt like I should let these guys in. These guys come in, and they're like, your landlord said, we should come in. The guy's like, okay, come on in. And they're like, we're gonna go to your bathroom, which, as it turns out, is where he filmed all the objects from. He has a little window in the bathroom. And they go in there for 20 minutes, and it's completely silent. He had no idea what they were doing. And eventually they come out of the bathroom, and they're like, thank you very much, and they leave. And obviously I checked with the landlord and all that. He had never talked to anybody from the city. And it was kind of like our little Men in Black.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I'm sure the audience is definitely familiar with the Men in Black, but those guys can be really creepy.
Yeah, and they popped up again, and obviously probably not the same guys, but this was another case, and unfortunately I never got to talk to the initial witnesses. Mm-hmm. And anyway, in between I had another case. This one a little bit further up the coast. Halfway, this was in Santa Monica, so I had another case about halfway to Malibu, where two witnesses literally saw an object, triangular craft, come out of the water and fly 30 feet above their heads, head towards the canyon. And then we get word that somebody else saw something similar about a year later, this time completely in Malibu. And I used to live in Malibu as a kid, so that area is always particularly interesting to me. And then, so this gives these two ladies are skinny dipping late at night in Malibu, which a lot of people do. I've done it as a kid and all that, but these were two adults. And they said, so anyway, they had this sighting of, this object coming out of the water and all that. And they freaked out, and they called the police. And 20 minutes later, these two guys show up in suits claiming they're from the FBI. And so they took these ladies in, and they wouldn't let them leave for like something between 12 and 24 hours. They kept asking the same question about, what did they see, what did you see? And I don't even know fully what they saw because I never got to talk to them. So I heard about this story, and so I had a source at the FBI, which I called. And then actually we ended up going out for drinks. I hope he's not listening, because I used to wait till he had about 3 or 4 before I started getting my info, And he was a little less guarded. So anyway, I'm like, look, I have this case, this is what happened. He's like, well, first of all, are you sure it wasn't a sub that they saw? Because off the coast of California, we have these drug runners, and they actually have subs now. And so a lot of people, some of the live people are seeing in the water late at night are actually these subs, and they head towards Catalina, and they dump their drugs off on the backside of Catalina Island. I'm like, no, this object flew and the whole deal. I'm like, okay, but how likely is it that if they called the police, which would be the highway patrol in Malibu, how would the FBI respond? He's like, there's no way. First of all, they don't monitor the lines when you call the police, and there'd be no reason for the FBI to show up. He's like, those were not FBI guys. And we were never able to track those guys down or anything. And he had no idea. I go, is there any way you can kind of check? He's like, yeah. He's like, they're not ours. Nobody knows anything.
Wow.
They're the bona fide Men in Black,
Yeah, no kidding. And, it seems like, a lot happens in Malibu, or off the coast and in that area. I know there's the, the underwater base that quite a few people talked about in the last couple of years. And, there's a researcher by the name of Preston Dennett who writes about that as well. You have also seen some USOs, correct? Or you've researched them and talked about them before.
Yeah, well, technically, but all of those were both USOs before they become UFOs, right? Because there are a lot of those seem to be coming out of the water. Right. Yeah, something, I don't know, for whatever reason, something I've always been really interested in, underwater UFOs. And I think, again, specifically because there's so many sightings, between Santa Monica and Catalina and towards Malibu. There always has been since the 1950s. So it's something I've always been interested in. One of the chapters in my book is, in fact, about Puerto Rico, which is between Puerto Rico and Florida, which is like USO Central, pretty much, If you want to see an underwater UFO, I would head to Puerto Rico.
No, what about the U.S., is it the USS Topanga?
Oh, the Topanga, yeah, that was... Well, all right, here's the background of that story. So an article came out in a French magazine. This anonymous individual sent out all these pictures to a magazine called Top Secret of allegedly UFOs, and they're about the clearest pictures that you've ever seen. And he claimed that it was taken by the U.S. Tripang 674 in 1971 off the coast of Norway. There's a Jan Island down there. But this is all anonymous, mind you. So, the French are actually kind of upset with me because, so they're running a story, but I'm like, but there's no background on this, right? No one actually managed to track down the sub or check with the admiral and all that. So I took it upon myself to actually take the case. And then I located the admiral, as it turns out, and he was, and in the meantime, another gentleman that was on the sub heard that I was looking for people that were on the sub. I don't know if you saw it on Facebook or whatever, but he contacted me himself to tell me about what happened. So both the admiral and him denied seeing anything unusual. I was able to confirm, and I checked on the Navy website as well, that the sub was at that place at the right time, that the anonymous sender had that right, but he could have also, found that on the internet with enough research. So everything about the sub and where they were was true, but as it turns out, there's nothing linking the sub to the actual photographs, which is something every article written about the case failed to mention. And as it turns out, there's an insignia, there's a name on the top of the photograph. It said Sigma, and I found that Sigma was actually a French photo agency that went defunct. It was bought over by Bill Gates back, I think, in the 1980s? I'd have to look at my notes, and eventually you let it go. But in the meantime, something like hundreds of thousands of their pictures went missing. So I think all the photographs actually came from, or some of the missing photographs, and for whatever reason, maybe this individual that sent them actually worked for Sigma, or he found the photographs, or who knows. And as great as the photographs are, there's no proof that there's anything remotely alien about them. They might have just been like some kind of, test objects or from whoever. But the bottom line is they could have been taken at any point in time until, Sigma went defunct, obviously, at anywhere in the world. There's nothing at all linking them to the sub in the Arctic in 1971. And again, every article I've seen mention and, that mention the case keeps saying that I said that they're UFOs and aliens and they're linked to the sub, and as it turns out, it's not true. At least there's no way to prove it. Until this anonymous, sender comes forward, we really have no idea.
What other significant USOs besides I keep getting that wrong, the Topanga, have you researched as well?
That's pretty much it, to be honest with you. I can't think of that's it in terms of USO. There's the three cases I told you from Santa Monica to Malibu and this one. Those are, the main ones that I personally was involved with.
Have you ever researched anything like in Lake Michigan or anything like that?
No, not specifically. No, I know there's a lot of sightings out there, and when I was in Chicago, I spent a lot of time at nights. I would ride my bike to Lake Michigan and just sit there and stare for hours, but I actually never saw anything. Mm-hmm. But all the Great Lakes and foreign lakes, Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, and specifically a lot of lakes in Siberia. I have a lot of objects that are seen coming in and out of the water. In fact, if there's one place in the world I would go besides, Puerto Rico, as I mentioned, I would go to Siberia.
Why Siberia?
It's just because, for one thing, a lot of these lakes are so remote, so if you're going to hide somewhere, it sort of makes sense that you would go there. But there's a long history of objects coming in and out of the water. There's certain lakes where local people have legends about cities underneath the water, whatever that's worth. I just think that with the amount of sightings down there and stories, and it's pretty current, I think it's one of the best places in the world to gather evidence because barely anyone's ever been there. There's been very little research done there. And, there's always been a lot there's all these spots in those areas where there's like a lot of like unknown radiation and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of anomalous zones in Siberia, where people see a lot of UFOs or people disappear or whatever. I just think that it's just we don't have enough data from that part of the world. I think it would be super interesting, and I really believe that there's good evidence to be found in that part of the world.
Is it because it's, like Russian territory, maybe?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, part of it costs money to go down there, but I've had a few sources, shall we say, were linked to Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, it's one of those things when you have, like, these sources, it's always very hard to confirm until you back it up and you actually go there.
Right.
But they've I've been told that would be the place to go for,
gotcha.
For whatever that's worth, And I've been trying to sell that to, producers for like 20 years, but no one's really that interested.
Got a question from the Spreaker chat, and thank you for putting that in caps, by the way. Beyond the Omniverse wanted to ask, Dave, has Alex personally encountered a UFO or USO himself, and has he ever seen an ET cryptid?
Yeah, I've seen about 5 UFOs, and I saw a film of a supposed alien one time. So I'll give you my 2 best UFO stories. I'll make it kind of quick. The first one I was referring to earlier is when I was 10 years old, which is what got me started on this whole journey. We were renting a house in Los Angeles, and it was like midnight. I was with my mom, a hairdresser, and I think that was it. But so I was 10 anyway, and this object came down from the sky and stood, I would say, literally like 30 feet to 20 feet above our heads at most. It was the size of the pool, completely silent, stayed there for about 10 seconds, and it kind of either blinked out or took off so quickly that, I couldn't tell the difference. That was my first encounter, but as it happened, it was like a chain of events that week. In fact, at some point, this kind of like this ball of light the size of a basketball was sort of floating around me in the garden. And like I said, that's what it kind of got me started. But the best visual, aside from that, I had is I was flying back from Vancouver. I was actually on a cryptozoology thing in Vancouver, looking for caddy, which is kind of like the local sea monster, kind of like Loch Ness type of deal, out in the ocean. Didn't see anything. But I was flying back on the plane. I saw this round brown object, completely circular, that was flying along the plane. And it followed the plane for a while and then just kind of like took off. And then I've had a few minor sightings here and there on investigations and all that, but nothing that's as spectacular as those 2. But going back to the film I was referring to, we had a case in Pasadena. This was during my time with MUFON, but it wasn't a MUFON case. It was a case of Dr. Barry Taft. Barry calls me up, and initially it was like a poltergeist case. And Barry's like, hey, we have this lady that has poltergeist activity at her apartment. Hey, do you want to go? I go, yeah, let's go. So we got in a car, we went over there, and initially it started off as kind of like a typical poltergeist case, except that she had some of the best pictures I've ever seen. She literally had one of her pictures. She was sitting on the bed, and right above her head was one head, and above that was another head. There was all these series of heads that went into the wall and disappeared into the wall of her bed. Like, she had pictures like that, like left and right. It was best pictures I'd ever seen, And at some point she's like, hey, I don't know what this is, but on my balcony I keep seeing these lights up in the sky. I'm like, well, let's see it, And she shows me these pictures, and they're like literally just kind of oval objects flying above a building. And at that point, I'm like, I didn't know what to make of it, because what are the chances that she's experiencing both a poltergeist activity and UFO activity at the same time?
Right.
So we investigated, and she didn't even know. I mean, she had no clue. She had never heard. She had no interest in paranormal whatsoever. She didn't even really know what a UFO was. It was like, she was. And then at some point she's like, look, I need to show you something. I have a film for my cell phone. I saw this little creature running around my bedroom at night. And, and I was like, okay, well, let's see it. So there's 4 of us there. It was me, Barry Taft, another investigator called Barry Conrad, and somebody named Jack, another investigator. All, excellent quality people. And the way we used to work is if we had a film, we would each watch the film separately and not comment on it until afterwards, as to not, influence both the witness and ourselves. And on the film, and unfortunately I only got to see it once, was this little creature. It almost looked like a stereotypical gray, just kind of walking around her bedroom next to her bed, and kind of going by the wall and all that. Every other film I've seen of so-called creatures or aliens, for lack of better words, have all been faked. Pretty much, most of the ones you see on the internet are all faked. But that one, it's the only one I've seen that I have a hard time explaining it.
Does it kind of catch you by surprise? Like, that don't look fake to me. In a way, it creeps you out.
Yeah, I don't know if it creeps me out, but I was like, I was like, holy crap! I was like, can't believe I'm seeing this.
Right.
And granted, it's cell phone quality, and it's middle of the night, so it's not like in daylight completely clear, but it's clear enough that I knew what I was looking at, and all of us did as well. Unfortunately, she was a heavy churchgoer, and her church confiscated all the pictures, and they took the memory card from the phone, and they burned it all.
Oh my! Are you serious?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
so Barry and I still talk about it at least every other week, about how we lost all that evidence. We never got. It's a shame for her too, because we had Barry Conrad had a deal set up for her to go do a show on television and the whole deal, and
wow,
it was probably the best case that kind of went nowhere I've ever had, unfortunately.
Yeah, no kidding, man. Oh my gosh.
And it's tough, and it's one of those, like, if somebody told me that story, I'd be like, yeah, dude, where's your proof, Because I complain about that all the time, right? People, tell me stories, but they have no proof whatsoever, which is kind of like the situation I'm in with this, but, for what it's worth, that's what I saw.
Wow, I'm wondering if those church leaders may be tied in with some other agencies, possibly 3 letters. Never know.
Yeah, you never know. I think part of it was that they were like, yeah, they're demons, those guys, they call us demon worshippers. And, yeah, I don't even know what happened to her, What's interesting, though, is she had a son, a 15-year-old son, that moved out because he was so freaked out of the place. And she was on the 4th dog. She kept getting new dogs, and they kept dying inside the apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And that tells you how little knowledge she really had about what's going on, because she's like, it's so weird, what a coincidence, the dogs kept dying. I'm like, well, it might not be a coincidence at that point, But,
it
was a great case.
Yeah, no kidding, man. And, to tie in, UFOs with the supernatural or paranormal, it's that's the first time I've heard that. But have you ever tried to tie those in together?
Yeah, it's something I've thought about throughout the years, even before that particular case. I think there's more cases though that start off as it's kind of like a UFO event, and a byproduct of that is is poltergeist type of activity. So maybe it has to do with the type of technology or energy, the UFO phenomena kind of uses. But I've never had one that starts off as just purely, ghost poltergeist case, which was what it was, because we had pictures of, she had all these pictures of all these figures inside the apartment, and all that eventually started evolving into kind of like a UFO thing. So I don't know what to make of it. There does appear to be a link on some level, but not always. But if you look at cases like the Mothman case in Point Pleasant, or even the Skinwalker Ranch case, those are particular kind of like unique situations, but those are cases where everything kind of get mixed into one.
Mm-hmm.
So it does happen where you just get a plethora of different types of paranormal phenomena, and what it means and why, I don't know, and nobody does, and they tell you they're lying.
Yeah, I can see that. Let's cover something else that you have been doing recently, especially with Rick, and that would be last year's investigation, the Bigfoot investigation.
Yeah.
And you guys came back with a cast.
Yeah, I have it right here in my kitchen.
That's pretty awesome. Now, is this something that you hadn't gotten before, or is this something to add to other things that you guys have encountered?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of, I guess, partly answer the question from the gentleman a few minutes ago. Yeah, I'd never seen Bigfoot, and I'd never seen anything like it. And I'd never actually even seen a footprint either. So yeah, this was my first, if it's what it really is. But yeah, first time. But I'm not a big fan of taking a cast anyway, because what does that really tell you, that Bigfoot was there? I'm more interested in where it's going, where it's going to be, so I can see it, film it, take a picture, or whatever. Get real physical evidence. I mean, a cast is just a cast, right? It's kind of like a secondary source. So it's cool, but it's not the end all.
No, there was some other evidence.
Cool.
Yes, there was some other. I don't want to say evidence, but I guess if you want to call it like tracking, or whatever, there were some broken branches and that kind of thing. I'm out of my element when I'm out of my element no matter what. But I mean, when it comes to this, I remember hearing you talking. You were talking about there was branches that were broken, couldn't have been the snow, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it wasn't the snow because it was before the snowfall, because this was in early October. It hadn't snowed yet. Yeah, part of and I used to get the stories a lot. In fact, I used to get these stories from FBI guys. That you go out in the woods and it's kind of like, it sort of seemed to appear to mark their territory by bending branches certain ways, by twisting them or breaking them, or making cross structures, with trees and that sort of thing. So we were driving along, and this was in southern Washington, incidentally, and so we were driving along, and I saw a broken branch on the side, and I'm like, Steve Murillo from UPARS, who was driving, like, stop. And I got out, and, it's just a broken branch, right? You don't know for sure. But I'm like, well, let's look around this area, which is an area I had picked out for months anyway, just from a map, and such, the area I really wanted to focus on. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, let's find a road, and I started, hiking into the woods. And so we found a road after Steve and I argued where to go, where I was really yelling at him in the car.
But that doesn't happen often.
That's not the first time. But yeah, I don't take not getting in my way well at times. But anyway, so we found this road, and Rick Sennett is behind us in the car, and so we go down there, and I go a lot by instinct when I'm out in the field. I like to feel the environment, and so we keep walking. And at some point, we find another broken tree branch, and there's a footprint right beneath it. But I looked at the footprint, and it was a bear. You can say, with a bear, sometimes it's hard to tell a bear footprint from from alleged Bigfoot footprint, but in this case, you can kind of see the claws. So I knew there was a bear there. But further, we found another broken branch. I think I found that one initially. But this one was up high. I'm 6'1", and I had to reach up and touch it. It was broken and twisted slightly, kind of like, what other people had reported from other Bigfoot sightings. And in front of it was like a deer track. So I followed the deer track along, and as it got a little more muddy, you start seeing these big footprints here and there. And then so we kind of assumed that if that's what it was following. It was about, by the way, the footprint was about 18 inches to 20 inches long. So. And there's no claw marks. You can see the toes and everything in some of them. So we theorized that perhaps it was about 24 hours old, and it was following the deer, maybe for food. And it found itself in this little clearing, and you can tell it kind of went around in a circle, theoretically, and probably, maybe found itself uncomfortable being out in the open and kind of went back into the woods. So, yeah, we had about 4 tracks that we saw. But, again, without seeing what really made the track, it's just speculation, right? But I mean, yes, what they look, like I said, from 18 to 20 inches long, and you can kind of see some of the toes. So it's not, and we were able to compare with the bear prints. In fact, we showed it to a guy who was a bear hunter this guy that kind of goes out for days. He goes to Alaska, he goes wherever, just hunting bears. And I'm like, hey, does that look like a bear track? He's like, no, I don't know what that is. So it was cool.
But he pretty much just like right away, he's like, yeah, that's something different.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not sure. You know, he's like, it's just, first of all, it's too big for, you know, even if you had a grizzly, which they don't really have out there, it was just too big for a bear. And he's like, and there's no claw marks, and, you know, look, it could have been, you know, really, really big guy with a boot, you know, with toes at the end. Maybe that's the only thing I could see.
That's a really big guy.
But it was,
really,
you know,
just,
yeah. Steve put his foot next to it. I forget what Steve is size, what, 12 maybe, 12 and a half. I'm not sure. He has big feet. So, and it was, you know, it was clearly about 18 to 20 inches long. So,
man, that is a big foot. I mean, that is,
and the thing is, I picked that area specifically because, not that I think Bigfoots live there, but I think it's within their range. And a lot of sightings occur that time of year between September and October. And I think it's part of whatever, you know, I don't know if they're, obviously I don't know why they're going along that particular, it's like it's kind of go around the mountain there. There's Mount Adams in that area. But I think the real population in that area is further out in a place called the Dark Divide, which is where the grizzly hunter said that, you know, the bear hunter, said, I can't think of the guy's name. But anyway, that's where he said we'd have to go if we really want to see some.
You mentioned Mount, I'm sorry.
Adams?
Yeah, you mentioned Mount Adams. Isn't that where they're seeing UFO sightings as well?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty heavy UFO area, as it turns out, which has nothing to do with Bigfoot, contrary to what some people have you believe. But
you really don't like that idea.
I just don't see a need for it, you know? I mean, if the evidence ever points in that direction, fine, but until it does, there's no need to go there.
I mean, aside from the obvious, why do you think that that Bigfoot couldn't be an alien?
Well, because we know from the fossil record. First of all, we have to assume Bigfoot's a primate, right? From every indication points to that, which isn't, you know, very much an earthly species. We're primates, technically. And, you know, if you really think about it, it's only North America where you start having stories about Bigfoot and being aliens and and associated with UFOs. Mm-hmm. If you start going to Asia, right? You have the Yeti in Tibet and Nepal. You go across the mountain range. It's called the Yeren in China. You continue towards Russia. They call it the Alma in the Mongolia, Almasty for that in Russia. Chichunao in Siberia. In that area, to me, it was kind of ground zero for that species. But none of those places you have stories of Bigfoot and UFOs and aliens. Only here in North America. And I just kind of refuse to believe there's 20,000 different species out there.
Mm.
You'd have to assume that they're more related somehow. And we know from the fossil record that some of our relatives, or even, maybe Gigantopithecus, whatever, animals that resemble Bigfoot once existed. So there's no reason to go outside that until it's proven otherwise. I do feel, we kind of have to go with what we know.
How long has the species been around? Your best guess?
My best guess would be there's two different possibilities. With Bigfoot, if you go with Gigantopithecus, which is an Asian species, went extinct about 300,000 years ago. So, and I'm not sure when that species came about. I don't know if they know. Let's say even if 1 million years ago. So that's one possibility. The other one would be more of a human relative. And so you have to go back to something that's pretty robust. Initially, the initial species, Australopithecus, you can start going back 2 million years ago till about 2 million years ago, 1.5. You had a robust branch of Australopithecines that presumably went extinct. But they looked a lot kind of like mini Bigfoot. Even had flexible feet because they lived in more woodland areas versus the Australopithecines that led to man, they led more in the dry areas. And so, in theory, we haven't found any, but if you look at primates and even human relatives, you're not going to find a whole lot of fossils in areas where it's warm and it's humid and there's a lot of vegetation because it doesn't preserve fossils. So you don't have a good track record with that. So if there's a good early candidate for Bigfoot, it would be the Australopithecus robustus or boisei, which was a very robust one. Presumably went extinct 1.5 million years ago, but assuming that it didn't and eventually evolved into Bigfoot, so you could, in theory, go back 1.5 million years to the origin for the species. But either way, I'm a big believer that Bigfoot originated in Asia and came across the Beringia land bridge just like we did. And, so if you look at where there's the Yeti today and the Almasti, to me that's ground zero. That's where the species started and eventually made its way into North America.
Now, is a lot of this information in your book as far as, what we're talking about right now with a lot of...
all of that is in the book. It's a little bit dated because we've had... And, I would take like another 4-hour show to talk about all the recent... There's been so many recent... Since I wrote the book, what now? Maybe, was it 4 years ago, perhaps?
Mm-hmm.
There's been so many discoveries since then. That's kind of like... I don't even mention Denisovans, I don't think, in my book. Which is a new robust species of man that was discovered. I lived in Asia. Or the red deer people, which was another very robust, mysterious hominid that lived in China only, 40,000 years ago. All of those are new discoveries.
Yeah, just really quick for the audience again, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Alex. I just want to make sure that the audience understands. You keep saying plethora. Dave Scott loves to say plethora, by the way. And there is a plethora of information. Just under cryptozoology, you have, dinosaurs and giants and, megafauna. You got all kinds of, that's great sea serpents, the sharks. I can go on and on and on. This is amazing, dude. This, all I have to say is it's been really cool going through your book, man. I just have to say I really dig it. So, and are you going to be writing a follow-up anytime soon?
Yeah, I'm not sure how I'm going to structure it yet. I was thinking about separating it to it might be several books, have a strict cryptozoology book, or maybe just be have a strict Bigfoot and Friends, book, and have a UFO book. So I don't know how long it's going to take, but yeah, it's definitely kind of in the works.
Yeah, and again, a lot of this is so detailed, like what Alex is describing right now, with just talking about some of the things about Bigfoot. It's all in here, and it's just amazing. So there, I'm not gonna go off on the tangent anymore. Let's get back to the stories and everything.
The important thing just to remember is that every subsequent discovery that we've made in terms of new species of primates or human ancestor or whatever, I think all of it has brought us closer to to Bigfoot, because all of them just added a key to the puzzle, and they all seem to fit so far. So I think, because we keep finding new mysterious, ancient species that are very robust. They're, we don't have a lot of bones, we don't have a lot of fossils yet, but so a possible ancestor for Bigfoot, there's more and more that comes out, every time we have a new discovery, which is very exciting. And that's what I mean, why we should start looking at that before we start looking at other, crazier explanation.
Right. And, again, for those of you who missed it, there was a question about, otherworldly, and I'm not going to say it's impossible, but as far as Alex is concerned, no, Bigfoot is not off planet. I just want to, we talked about that,
yeah.
But, so.
And I'm not saying there's not another UFO type of phenomena that mimics that, or can be mistaken for Bigfoot or for whatever. You know, I'm not saying that, but that's something else differently. I think, but I do believe that there's a native species on this planet of bipedal primate that you can explain through evolution and the fossil record.
Yeah, that's true. There you go. There's another question in here. I missed it, but I'll get back to it later. When we're talking, Bigfoot, and then, you were just mentioning a bunch of these other discoveries since you've written the book. We've talked a lot about people like Josh Gates, who you've mentioned that, you respect him because he's one of those people. Yeah, he has a show on TV, but he's actually doing real research.
Yeah.
No, and that I think that's important. That when we're talking about big money and networks and that kind of thing, somebody's actually doing something for once that actually looks like they're getting somewhere.
Absolutely, yeah. So I see it can be done.
Can be done. That's true. So, what do you feel is going to be happening in the next couple of years as far as Bigfoot is concerned, or what would you like to see besides being captured or being out? I mean,
well, one thing I'd like to see is Bigfoot not being shot.
Thank you.
I'm not a big fan of the shoot Bigfoot shows, but I'd like to see a little more diversity in the studies of Bigfoot, spending more time in places like Siberia again, which actually is a great spot, China, but specifically where I would go would be Russia. I think the thing with some of those areas, and I realize, people are like, well, why go all the way over there when you can just go right here in North America? And that's a good question, and I don't really have a good answer for you, but I do think there's areas, for example, in the Caucasus or in Siberia where there's very, very few people. And they're not necessarily harder areas to get to. And I think, and the Almasis, it's called in Russia, or Chuchunau, as in Siberia, I don't think it's afraid of man or doesn't keep its distance quite as much, because there's a lot more stories of closer encounters, only because it doesn't encounter man as often. It's not getting shot at, or I think there's an opportunity there to get close. And but yeah, I mean, again, it's going to require more money than going to Pacific Northwest. But again, even here in North America, though, if you look at a lot of these shows, which is basically 99% of research these days are done by groups that have television shows, right? Because that's the only way to really get funding. When you're filming, you just can't go deep enough in the forest. And when you have to set up your shot for half an hour, so the lighting's right and all that, you just don't have time to go deep enough in the forest to find anything. So I'd like to see get back to real expeditions. That's what I want. I mean, I can, and I have like 5 to 6 spots in my head right now that I think would provide results. I really do.
Right on. I really hope that happens, especially with Bigfoot. But there's more cryptids that we can talk about. And when we, one of the things that I think I mentioned this to you, I talked to my my wife's cousin, who is also a cryptozoologist and investigator. His name is Lupe Mendoza. He lives in Texas, and he's done a lot of research and stuff. And we were talking about my gosh, it looks like a hyena, but it's the Tasmanian tiger. Is that what it's called?
Yes, you mean the Tasmanian tiger in Australia?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, and,
the thylacine.
Yeah, that's it. The thylacine. And when I thought, wow, that's crazy because the way it opens his jaw, you can like unhinge his mouth and it like becomes really big.
Yeah. Well, thylacine is interesting because it's only been extinct. Well, on the mainland, it's been extinct for a few hundred years, but in Tasmania, it's only been since the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, yeah, if I were to pick one of the animals most likely or cryptid to be discovered soon, thylacine would be kind of on the top of the list, just because it hasn't been extinct that long, and I think scientific groups are more likely to take interest in it because it doesn't seem as crazy, because it's an animal we know we have film and pictures of it from the 1930s,
right.
In the zoo.
Right.
And it's some pretty reliable evidence. There's a good film somebody filmed one, what looked like one, earlier last year, which was actually quite excellent. It moves like a thylacine. It's got the tail like a thylacine, the whole deal, in Australia. So, and extinction. It's a lot easier to think something's still around from 300 years ago than Mokele Membe. That's people kind of equate with a dinosaur that went extinct 65 million years ago, presumably. So
that's what I love about cryptozoology. Is, to me, it seems like there's more evidence of these animals, these creatures, whether it's on film or sightings or whatever. To me, they seem a little more concrete evidence, than some of your.
Yeah, I mean, there's some that don't exist. Some are going to turn out like
right.
I wouldn't put my money on sheep squatch,
Yeah, bat squatch.
But
at the same time, I'm kind of hoping that there's not a real Dogman, because some of the stories I've heard about Dogman are just frightening. I mean, they're just downright scary. Is that something that you've looked into by any chance?
I started to recently. It kind of took me a while to come around, because it's one thing to go around, trying to get money or whatever, or trying to study Bigfoot or Mokele Membe or the Wahila or whatever. But, when you start talking about a species that every other, if you look at cryptozoology in the purest sense, you're all dealing with animals or cryptids that existed before, or there's a trace of them in a fossil record. There's an animal that's kind of like them. From a biological standpoint, the whole Dogman thing is pretty much impossible, right? A bipedal dog-like creature or wolf, it's essentially, we were talking about like a werewolf, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no precedence in biology for something like that. So then you start dealing with, that's funny in my book, in fact, I came up with the para-cryptozoology for all the species that don't quite fit within biology. So it took me a while to kind of come around with that, but I've been getting a lot of interest in that, a lot of sightings, and I wish everybody could see it, but I saw some tracks recently that some private pictures from someone that were pretty impressive, and it's it's hard, it's like if you're gonna take into account people's single sightings of Bigfoot or or whatever, and you get the same quality type of sighting of something like Dogman, you can't just completely ignore it, because then you've been hypocritical. So, and there still seems to be a certain areas where most of the sightings take place, whether it be Upper Michigan, Wisconsin, or Kentucky. It's not like you're necessarily getting sightings in Malibu. So you still talk about some pretty remote wilderness areas. So maybe there's something to it. But and here's the thing that's super important when you start talking about Dogman. You're talking about the tracks, right? So Bigfoot, us, bears, are plantigrade, right? We have a flat foot. So obviously canines don't. They're digigrade because they're not bipedal. So if you start getting a track that's maybe a plantigrade track and you associate it with Dogman, maybe you're not really talking about a Dogman. Maybe you're talking about a Bigfoot of some kind, right? It just happens to look a little different, and people kind of equate it with, with a werewolf, and the Dogman thing comes about. So I don't know. But, I think it's worth looking into, though, because it's cool. Who doesn't like werewolf movies?
I do. I mean, totally. and again, there's a lot of legends. I mean, you even have the Anubis, that has the head of a dog. The ancient Egyptian. I don't know I don't want to call it a god, but he's definitely a figure.
Well, no, maybe it's not just that. You have someone like Alexander the Great's people that claim they have encountered them in their travels. It actually goes back further than people think, And I even had a guy. He was, in fact, that happened to me twice. Two separate individuals. One guy was a special forces guy, and one guy was, what was he? I thought he was, I'm trying to think. I don't remember if he was not Navy. He had to be Marine or whatever. Anyway, both of these people were stationed and spent some time in the Middle East, around Afghanistan. And they didn't see anything specifically, but they said that some of the other guys started telling them about these dogman type of creatures that they were seeing.
Can I get you to hold that thought right there, Alex? We got to cut to a break. I apologize, but we'll be right back. This is Spaced Out Radio, and I am Dave Cruz. We are talking with Alex Mistretta, and we will be right back. Don't go away right after this.
Hi there, this is Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio, and I want you to come on a nightly journey. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, every Monday through Friday, you can come hang out with me and the other space travelers. We have it all from Carl the Alien bouncing on by to those misfit gnomes causing havoc. It's 3 hours of fun and entertainment on those topics the mainstream really doesn't want to touch. Come get all paranormal with us at spacedoutradio.com, and together, my friends, along with our resident guitar god Bumblefoot, we own the night.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
The SOR Sightlines is a place for you to find answers to your strange experiences. Hi there, this is Mike Schmidt. If you have had an encounter with ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, ETs, or anything else that doesn't make sense, head to spacedoutradio.com and file a Sightlines report. All information you give is 100% confidential, and I will personally help you find the answers you need. SOR Sightlines, your answers are a click away.
Hi there. I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guests and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Cruz and SOR.
And love me some Bumblefoot. Pretty kick-ass. Welcome back to Spaced Out Saturday nights with me, Dave Cruz. Tomorrow night, Elizabeth Anglin has Psychic Sundays on Spaced Out Sundays Cosmic Passport, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. You can also listen to me, Dave Cruz. I host Beyond the Strange Radio Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Go to spacedoutradio.com/paranormal and click on the Beyond the Strange button for the links and info to the show. We want to welcome everyone again listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are also live on the United Public Radio Network on 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are live on TalkStream Live, iHeartRadio, and KTLK, TheFringe.fm as well. Find us on TuneIn and iTunes for downloads. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. Head on over to the website for some great features from videos from UFO seekers and Contact TV. And remember to shop at our store and pick up some t-shirts, some posters, stickers. Don't forget to rock out to our resident guitar god, Ron Bumblefoot Thal, who is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. And once again, I just want to thank and welcome back my guest for tonight, Mr. Alex Mistretta. Alex, thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely.
And Alex, once again, where can you find your information, like websites, Facebook, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, mostly, Facebook under Alex Mistretta, obviously. And I have a website for the book. It's called thepresencebook.com. It's easy to remember. Also, you can find some of my writings on Facebook under UPARS. UPARS is Steve Murillo. And, in fact, they're the ones that funded a lot of some of my work. And also, UPARS has a YouTube video channel on YouTube, and you'll find some of my investigations are there, but if not, you'll have, there's hundreds of videos from UPARS past speakers and all that, so it's another good place to go. But mostly just go to Facebook. That's the easiest way to find me. I'm creating a new website now called Mistretta Expeditions, specifically more, to start pushing the expedition aspect of all this, but it's not yet ready, so.
We'll be looking forward to that, Alex. That sounds awesome. And again, the book is called The Presence, an Exploration into the Paranormal, and you can find that on Amazon.com. So we left off talking about Dogman, and you had a story from a guy in the Special Forces.
Yeah, completely, by accident, in fact. So you'll find that when you'll interview people that the first 20 minutes you're not getting anything. They'll, most of the time it takes them about 20 minutes to get comfortable with you to really tell you the good stuff, So I'm talking to this guy, and he's basically asking me a lot of questions, and I didn't even know it was Special Forces until about 10 minutes into the conversation. He's like, yeah, man, he's like, I've kind of been all over the world on Special Forces and all that. And he's like, what do you think about some of these guys used to tell me, back in, I forget if it was Afghanistan or somewhere in the Middle East, about these, kind of like bipedal wolf dog-like creatures that some of my other buddies used to see. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, you mean like a Dogman, which you had never heard of it, So
right.
I'm like, yeah, I'm familiar with it. I've heard of it. Usually we get sightings out here, like in Upper Michigan. And I tell him, I actually talked to another guy that was in the military that was telling me about some sightings that his buddies had also in Afghanistan, And these are two completely unrelated guys, both in the military. And, it was interesting because he was kind of embarrassed to actually bring this up, which I can understand because I would be, And, I'm like, yeah, he's like, I go, that's interesting because if you look at some, older text, some of the areas where Alexander Grade went into, those are the same areas this guy was essentially talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, look, I don't know if I believe my buddies, but, they're guys I count on, I get my life is in their hands. He's like, and they said they've seen these things and they've heard about them, and
and they're serious,
like deep in the hills. Yeah, he was serious, yeah.
Wow.
And again, you can't verify it, but it's the second time I've heard that from that part of the world, completely by accident too. And this time, the first guy was a guy that had a UFO experience while he was stationed up there, and the Dogman thing just came about, because of that. But this one guy, it was just like a guy I met, and we just happened to be talking, and that's the story I got.
That's wild.
And I like it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that just shows that there's so many stories around the world that we don't get to hear about, probably because we're not allowed, to learn about them, and, they're not really allowed to talk about it either,
Well, but not just that. Most people are just embarrassed. I'll tell you right now, I bet in terms of all the stories that we have of all the strange phenomena all put together,
mm-hmm.
It's probably about 2% of what people have actually seen,
Yeah.
I mean, one time I was, I do some work as a personal trainer because, this stuff, if you want to investigate this stuff full time, it doesn't pay very well.
Yeah.
So, and I'm training this guy in the gym, and I was training him for a marathon. And I had never mentioned this stuff when I personal trained just because, for obvious reasons. The guy's like, wait, you're that Alex Mistretta? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, what should a guy talk about UFOs on TV? You'd see me on a show or something. I'm like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, dude, my uncle from Chile, he was walking down the jungle, and he saw land a UFO, and these guys started coming out. I was like, wait, what? And essentially started telling me this story about his uncle, who had, it was apparently deeper in the jungle that he made it seem, and the guy just happened to come across. He said he saw a UFO that landed, and occupants came out.
Oh,
so,
wow.
It's like completely I was in the gym training this guy, and he just kind of told me the story.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking, and again, obviously, right, I don't know if it's true or not, but I don't see any reason why he'd be lying to me.
Right.
At least that's the story his uncle told him. There must be again, it's not, let's go back to the Three Amigos plethora. There must be a plethora of those stories that we never ever hear about,
So wild, man. I mean, yeah, that's amazing that you're training someone, and the next thing you know, oh, by the way, UFOs, yeah.
I mean, there's stories that I've never told anybody.
Yeah?
To be honest with you, there's certain stories, there's certain things because I don't quite know what to make of it. Stuff that they're pretty spectacular that I've never told anybody except for maybe Barry Taff and Steve Murillo, that they're the only people in the world that have probably heard those stories. Even I kind of keep things back just because for various reasons, but some stuff seems so far out or so crazy that, you're worried about your reputation, what people are going to think or how it's going to affect you or,
Right. Well,
and I'm in this field, day and night, and I hold things back, admittingly.
Well, you probably are doing it for a good reason. That's good enough. So it's not so uncommon that people don't talk about it. I mean, you think that in a time right now where everyone is watching Ancient Aliens or finding Bigfoot or whatever, they're listening to shows like these. There's still people out there who just kind of look at you weird, like, yeah, right.
Oh, absolutely. It's
dog man.
Here's the thing, though. Before we get back to cryptozoology, there's another aspect to all this as well. And so I'm about to tell you a story I've never told publicly ever. There's certain things that happen to you that it's not that you don't want to talk about it, but for some reason you don't. And you forget about it. You know what happened, but it never enters your mind. And I'm going to give you an example. When I was in college, I used to like to go ride my mountain bike in the middle of the night just because I was in University of Illinois, Chicago, as you mentioned before, because there's not a lot of cars. I could take jumps, go up sidewalks, go downstairs, and the whole deal. I used to be into that. And I was coming back from McDonald's. Don't tell any of my college coaches. And to get back to school, I would go through this little bridge that would go over the river. And it was a bunch of abandoned warehouses or whatever on the side. And so I come around this corner at 2:00 in the morning, and in front of me is this large black helicopter with even if the refueling probe in the front.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Makes no sense, right? In the middle of downtown Chicago, and it's literally about 30 to 40 feet away from me. The probe is facing me, and it's completely silent. I don't feel any wind or anything. And the rotators are going, which makes no sense, right? You should be able to see, hear. And then I don't remember exactly what happened. It presumably went away, and I went back to school, and I never thought about it again. Never really talked about it until a few years later. I'm like, yeah, this weird thing happened. And I told Steve one time, and I forgot we were going in the car, and he's like, dude, you realize that's not normal, right? And he finally hit me that there was something anomalous to that. But even I, as an investigator, if anybody else would tell me that story right away, I'd be like, well, that's not really a black helicopter you saw, whatever. It doesn't make any sense. Something else happened. But for whatever reason, my brain had been kind of switched off to the point where I'd never really even thought about talking about it. I went back to school, went to sleep, woke up next morning, I went to practice, whatever, I went to class, or hopefully went to class. And,
Is it because it was associated? Is it because it was associated with a helicopter? Maybe.
I don't know. There's this occasionally, and this is usually related to the UFO phenomenon. Events happen to you, and it's remember I told you about I was telling a story about the guy in Santa Monica, where he's like, I don't know, for some reason I wanted to let those guys in.
Yep.
you're manipulated in some way to either talk about something, not talk about something, act a certain way.
In a sense, it's like mind control.
Yeah, it's sort of like a mind control, and like it's slightly more subtle than that, but that's what it is. And I don't know what it means, and I don't know why I saw that helicopter, or maybe it wasn't there, and I thought I saw it. I don't know what that means, but I remember specifically I came around the corner on my pink bike because I had a neon pink bike because it was the 90s, man, and it was cool.
Nice.
I named my bike the Amazon, by the way, in case is that too much information. But but anyway, I came around the corner. I came around the corner on the Amazon, and and there it was. I remember clear as day. So, what do you make of that? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, people have screen memories. They talk about a lot of stuff like that. Where yeah. So I mean, it's one thing, but then for some reason you're left to believe it's another, and there you go. You have a different memory of something that really was what it's what it seemed like.
Yeah, it's like I'm in therapy. It's my first time talking about it publicly.
Well,
it's cathartic.
Yeah. Well, it's good to get it out in the open because I'm sure you're not the only one, Alex. That's the thing.
Oh no, I know. I've heard plenty of the type of stories.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not uncommon. I do want to get back to some questions that were left from the last hour, and I appreciate everyone's patience. Thank you so much. Again, we're covering so much, and we're not going to get it all covered in 3 hours, and that's okay because this is why we do it. We do as much as we can. Some shows, and the next show we cover more, and there you go. So this comes from Dale in the Facebook. Space Travelers Facebook page. Is there any correlation between areas of high Bigfoot population and areas with large numbers of human disappearances?
Yes. But, yeah, there is actually. Yeah, that's all I really have on that. In fact, I do know, Native Americans have a lot of stories about the large cannibals in the woods. They used to kill people and eat them and all that. Again, the problem is until you see a Bigfoot killing someone or abducting someone or whatever, that you can't. You just all you have is kind of a correlation. Mm-hmm. But if you do put that on the map, places of wilderness, people disappear where they've had Bigfoot sightings. Absolutely, it matches in a lot of cases.
Interesting.
So, for what it's worth, there it is. Yep.
Okay. And has Alex done any work on the Flatwoods Monster?
On the Flatwoods? No, I haven't. I'm sorry. I know of the case. It's fascinating. But my buddy Barry Conrad, who actually, the guy who was on the case in Pasadena with me, I haven't spoken to him in years, but I think he did a short film on it. He did documentaries as well. I think he did a film on that. Can't tell you what it's called, but because I've been out of touch with him. But yeah, I don't. It's not. I've never really went in depth on it, but it's a great story. It's fascinating.
Yeah, that's first time I ever heard of the Flatwoods Monster. Cryptid, UFO, weird, science gone horribly wrong. Probably.
Yeah,
all
look
the
it
above.
up. It's good. It's interesting. Yeah, look it up. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, so you got some very interesting stories, Alex. Talk about the special forces guy, the black helicopter. Yeah. There was a story that you wanted to talk about. Well, actually, let's do this real quick for our Canadian folks up there in the the Great White North. We wanted to talk about the Wahili.
Wahila.
Hila. Thank you.
Waheela.
Okay. So it's apparently it's a giant white wolf, but there's more to it.
Yeah, there's most of them are sited in Northwest Territories. There's a place called the Hahini Valley, which is also called the Headless Valley. The reason it's called the Headless Valley is because it has a reputation for bodies. People were found dead with their heads missing. It was coined after there's the what they're called, the McLeod brothers. They were found with no heads in, I think, 1918, 1908. It goes back for a while. It's interesting. It's pretty remote. There's also been a lot of disappearances, which kind of goes back to what the guy was talking about. There's also been a lot of Bigfoot type of sightings in that area as well. But yeah, the animal called the wahila. It used to be reported all the way down to Upper Michigan, but today it's pretty much specifically in the Hahine Valley and also in northern Alaska, in fact. So it looks like a giant white wolf. It's about 3 to 4 feet in height. Kind of like the shoulder. It's got this like shaggy white pelt. It's got a really thick head, kind of small ears, smaller than the wolf. But the reason I don't think it's a wolf is, first of all, it's not a pack animal. It's always been seen alone. It's never been seen in a pack. And so there's a few theories in terms of what it might be. There used to be bear dogs in North America, which went extinct 3 million years ago. And this is where this goes back to what I was talking about the plantigrade versus the digigrade. Bear dogs were plantigrade. They had a foot just like us and bears. So, to my knowledge, there hasn't been any track, or no one's actually come forward with a cast or a track of the wahila, which would be really interesting to see, because then you'd be able to tell if you're dealing with something that's more canine, or you're dealing with maybe, relic population of bear dogs. But yeah, there's been some pretty reliable sightings up in Canada. It's kind of like, aside from Bigfoot, it's kind of like the other Canadian unknown monster. But yeah, it's a lot of people think it's a relic population of dire wolves, which is another possibility. Especially because the dire wolves have this super strong dentition. So that could, if that animal's responsible for some of the missing heads, that could kind of explain it. It's one of those, I like that because that's obviously an animal, right? And it's 100% believable. You can have an undiscovered either, maybe species of wolf or relic population of bear dog or whatever. And it's an animal that can definitely be found. And, cryptozoology doesn't just cover, the known monsters like Bigfoot and Nessie. There's a lot of interesting other animals out there that most people don't hear about, but I think that are worth researching before they go extinct.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I brought up, the thylacine. Yeah.
Well, the wahila is interesting because since its range used to go down to like Upper Michigan, which is also where you have all the dogman reports of today. They used to, it kind of used to have, I guess, the same range. It doesn't anymore. I don't know any sightings of this, the wahila in North America aside from Alaska for the last, 100 years or so. They're pretty much specific to the Northwest Territories these days, from at least from what I've heard. So.
Yeah, there was a comment.
I always thought.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say I always thought that was just a kind of a cool, unknown cryptid that no one really ever talks about.
That is cool. I'm definitely going to read up on some more on that because I love Game of Thrones, and they have dire wolves in there.
Dire wolves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing a comment in Facebook about winter is coming. Well, winter's here. There you go.
But part of the reason I wanted to bring it up is in my always trying to get expeditions going and get funding and get interest from like producers or anybody that that'll give me money to go anywhere. With Games of Thrones being that popular, I was hoping I could get more interest, towards the wahila or something like that. So
I'll keep putting it out there. You never know.
Yeah.
Maybe HBO will do a documentary and you can lead the expedition.
They should.
I
get results, I promise. I guarantee results on your show.
I believe you. Yeah, definitely. If you're listening, any HBO producers out there, Alex Mistretta is the man. So,
I'm guaranteeing results.
Check it out.
This is why I get in trouble.
So, we were talking about the Pasadena poltergeist, UFO case
Yeah.
earlier, and I wanted to bring up the Ghost Girl. I don't remember if we were tying that to the Ghost Girl or we're tying something else to the Ghost Girl.
Well, I think you mean from our earlier conversation before the show?
Yeah.
Well, you asked me about the Holy Grail briefly.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It was the Holy Grail.
Yeah. Years ago, I originally were, and honestly, I don't even have one of my books here because I sold my last copy.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I sold that many copies, but that was one of them. But I was doing research for the book, and I was in Brittany in France, doing research on the Holy Grail. There's an area there that's tied to like kind of the King Arthur mythos and all that, and Merlin, one of Elijah's Merlin is buried there. So I was there doing research for the book, and I don't know if any of it really made it into the book, but there's one area where there's a lake. It's called the Lake of the Fairies. And the legend has it that Morgan Le Fay used to kind of like vacation there, But it's also an area where it's got a reputation for kind of like, paranormal activity. And there's stories of people disappearing, even though I've never been able to really confirm that, like, at all. And it's also, it's also a lot of lore about people seeing fairies or whatever in this forest throughout history. So anyway, we're going out for a walk, and I was there at the time with my not the stepdad from London, but my current stepdad, who's was kind of a researcher in his own way. Him and my mom are actually wrote a book about Nostradamus, which was actually quite excellent. But anyway, we were there doing research, and so we're 20 minutes into the forest. We hadn't seen anybody, and my mom is a little bit psychic. Like, she gets these letters written on her arms that comes out occasionally. And so we're walking through this one path at some point, and my mom's like, wait, let's stop. And I'm looking at her arms. She starts getting letters. And it's not like it was a message or anything, but it started like her skin kind of raises. You can kind of see an A or B or whatever, right? And so we're in this one area, and I'm like, well, let's start just taking tons of pictures, right? So we're all just taking tons of pictures. I'm like, if anything, they'll be cover pictures for the book or whatever. And we didn't think much of it, And we were there for 20 minutes. There's one path in or out. We didn't see anybody else. To the main area in question, which we're about to get to, where the girl appeared.
Right.
It's behind where she was is a cliff, so she couldn't have come from that direction. To one side is like a river, like a small river, but and the other side is where we came from. 20 minutes we were there, three of us. It's impossible for somebody else to be there. So we took pictures, and when we developed the pictures, this girl was standing kind of like behind the branches, but you could see her face clearly, red hair. She had very modern looking. She had a coat on, and she was staring at us. And I call it the girl that wasn't there. And I also like to say it's the best paranormal picture ever taken, because I know that annoys people, and I like annoying people. But that's besides the point. But, so, it's about as clear, but it, honestly, that really might be, because it's about as clear of a picture of an apparition that you've ever seen. And unfortunately, but, at that time, it was like everything was on, we weren't using digital. This was about maybe 2001, 2000. I didn't even have a cell phone yet. So it wasn't until we developed a roll of film that she appeared in only one of the pictures. We took an entire roll of film for, those 20 minutes. In only one of the pictures she actually appeared in, just standing there and staring.
Yeah, that's an interesting indication right there that out of all the pictures, she's only in one.
Yeah.
But you would think that she would be in more than one picture if if she was there, a couple of seconds later or whatever.
Yeah, and then I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't have the negative. In fact, I just got a message from my stepdad right here live saying that he's not sure what a negative is. It might be in some box that he has. So hopefully one day we can find it. But
oh, right on. I'm glad he's listening. Thank you very much for listening to the show and listening to Alex.
Yeah, and unfortunately their book's not available. Might as well pimp their book while I'm here. It's not available in English, but it's a Nostradamus book. The authors are Dominique and Jerome Nobecool, if anyone's interested and speaks French. If you're interested in Nostradamus, it's fascinating. But
yeah, he is very interesting. I'm kind of glad this, I'm not saying that they didn't come true or whatever his predictions, but some of the end of the world stuff, that I'm glad that I remember watching that movie, the Nostradamus movie back in the early 80s, I think it was.
Yeah, it rings a bell.
Yeah, The Man Who Saw Tomorrow. That's the name of the movie.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think prophecy is fluid. I think just by making a prophecy, you're just kind of seeing a potential outcome, and which I think we can affect ultimately. So, which I guess in some way that would prevent any prophecy from coming true, right? If it's a big prophecy and everybody's thinking about it, it actually affects the outcome. But that's a whole other show.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, I definitely believe in everyone, or not everyone, but a multitude of people changing realities just by what they believe in. I mean, it's like like prayer in a way.
Yeah, but I really believe that's what that is ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, and that can even be magic, in a sense. So it's all related. It's all interesting. You had some stories from Africa.
Yeah, you mean, are you talking about X?
I think so. Or
Mokele Membe. I know we didn't even talk about that, so I don't know which one you wanted me to talk about.
Yeah, man. We talked about Mokele Membe, and we didn't really get that. I'll tell you what. Let's get down to that the haunted cave.
Okay.
And that's actually in Saudi Arabia, so I'm kind of close. Nowhere near as anyways, but the haunted cave.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the story nobody really knows about. I found about it by a book by a guy named Howard Bloom, which I think he was a New York Times writer. I'm not sure, actually. I don't have the book here with me. But anyway, the story was that in the, I don't know if anybody remember, but in the 1980s, the Saudis had made a deal with China. This was supposed to be secret at the time until satellites picked it out. And they met in the middle of the Arabian Desert on the site that was officially called Site N4. Mm-hmm. And they were testing, the Saudis were buying Chinese missiles. It was at a mountain, it was at the top of the mountain. They had an installation there, a Saudi installation. It was at a mountain called Jabal al-Lawz. Now, before we get back to that, so they're testing these missiles, and they're building radars on the top of this mountain. And the Chinese would hire a lot of Filipino workers that they would import from the Philippines to go, kind of do all the menial work. And one day, this guy was on top of the mountain. He was clearing. He was at this clearing for. He was bringing up equipment, I think, for radar arrays. So anyway, and he goes on his lunch break, and he goes missing for 24 hours. And been in Saudi Arabia, they're all thinking, maybe he's a spy or whatever, is Israel spy or whatever, and everybody's in the panic. They can't find him. This guy comes back 24 hours later in complete shock. They're trying to get a story out of him. He doesn't want to say where he was, what he was doing. Eventually, they break him down, and his story was that he was held prisoner in a cave by a ghost that sang to him.
He sang.
So they're thinking he's crazy, right? And but here's the thing, though: the Jabal al-Lawz, it's the mountain that a lot of people think is actually the real Mount Sinai. And in fact, at the bottom of the mountain, there's a lot of archaeological sites with they found some altars, and there's drawings on some of the rocks of cattle and all that. And it's all blocked off because this was a military installation. It's pretty much decommissioned, I believe, today. And it's never been excavated. Now, fast forward a few years, this whole thing blew over. with the missile and the testing and all that. And the base was still there, but basically they had very light security. And these two guys, a senator from, and I can't remember what state it was now, and a SWAT police officer are convinced that this is actually the bona fide Mount Sinai, and that there's gold on the mountain. And their whole purpose was to go up there and, make some money and find gold.
Mm-hmm.
The famous, gold of Exodus, right? Whether it exists or not, I have no idea, but they really thought it did. So they went up there, and they snuck up on top of the mountain, and like I said, the base was largely decommissioned, and you only had, about a series of a couple guards that basically just went around the path near the top. And these guys are up there, and for a second they kind of panicked, and they see the guards coming, and they're like, we got to go hide. And they hadn't found any gold. They hadn't found anything at that point. And they go hide in this cave, presumably the same cave that the worker was in.
Right.
And these guys were guys that they were complete. At the beginning, they were atheists. They didn't believe in God. They didn't believe in the paranormal. Nothing. Since then, they've gone kind of fundamentalist since that experience, and I've gotten a little weird. But and one guy starts walking in the cave. He's like, I can't go in there. It's just scaring me. I don't want to go in there. This was a SWAT guy.
Okay.
And then so one of them, and I think it was a SWAT guy, stays at the entrance of the cave. He doesn't want to go in. The other guy goes in deeper, and he starts hearing singing, and he starts feeling the presence of there's a presence. There's somebody else in there with him.
Whoa.
And then eventually they completely freak out, and it kind of comes running out, and largely the guards were gone, so they came back down the mountain, never found any gold. But we're convinced that there's something up in this cave and on top of this, mountain. Whether it's Mount Sinai or not, I have no idea. It's a lot of. I think it's pretty safe to say that the tourist Mount Sinai is probably not the real Mount Sinai, whatever the real story of Moses really turns out to be.
Right.
But I find it super interesting that they build an installation on top of this mountain that may or may not have been Mount Sinai. That there's supposedly a haunted cave up there that two independent sources have seen. There's an archaeological site on the bottom that no one's excavated. I think it's just a great, whatever that turns out to be, even if it's nothing, it's such a great story. And, and going back to, obviously everybody knows that, Moses was carrying the ark. And I always found the ark absolutely fascinating because, if you read some of the accounts in the Bible, if you touch it, you die. It creates lesions. Your hair falls off. You get tumors,
Radiation.
It sounds like radiation poisoning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you put kind of all these elements together, and I don't know what the end result would be, but it's another project that I've had in mind for many years. Obviously, you have to get invited to the kingdom. You can't just go to Saudi Arabia, and even if this base is completely decommissioned, there's nobody there. Obviously, you have to get permission, and it's increasingly difficult because of the political situation in the world. But if people would go, what's the one alleged haunted place you'd want to go to? That would be my first pick. Because I don't pick the easy ones, clearly.
Yeah,
and Chernobyl would be too, but so there you go.
Yeah, man, that's got to be really wicked. That's got to be just cray.
Yeah, and again, like I said, it's one of those stories. You only have two sources essentially, right? You have three sources. You have the writer Howard Bloom and those two guys. They each wrote books subsequently, but apparently they had a falling out. They don't talk anymore, and they both become really kind of heavy, hardcore fundamentalists since that experience, which is interesting. But I just think it's one of the most interesting stories that no one's ever heard, and it's been bugging me for years. If you're gonna go do the ghost hunting thing, you might as well go big.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But still, for those who want to start, locally, that's, it's like, even Skinwalker, right? That's a good place to start. You did an investigation with
Steve Murillo.
Steve, a couple years ago.
Yeah, we spent 4 days around Skinwalker.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, everything you've heard about the place is all true. Everybody we talk to had just seen something from phantom dogs, literally at the entrance of the ranch, to UFOs. We talked to this one of the more interesting stories, which was kind of off. So here's the thing: people think everything's located just on this one ranch property, right? But it's not. It's for miles around. There's something going on. We're talking to a lot of the areas are on the reservation, right? And we're talking to this one girl. She's a white girl, in fact. She's one of the few people that lives in a trailer in a reservation. And we stop, and she's like, "Well, let me tell you a story. One day, where I was with my friend watching TV, and then we looked in the kitchen, and we saw what can best be described as a shadow person." She's like, it was in full 3D, walking around the kitchen. As soon as it saw us, it kind of put its back against the wall as if it was trying to hide from us. But it had no features. It was all black. It was like a big black shadow. And so she calls the Indian police, which is separate from the regular police. And they show up, and at that time, these girls could see it, the shadow person, through the TV, right? They had a reflection on the TV that they had turned off. And as soon as he wasn't in their way, they kind of ran outside and waited for the police. This guy comes in, and they take their guns out, and then they're going inside the trailer, and they didn't find anything. And they told her, and they're like, "Look," she's a little embarrassed. She's like, "You're gonna think I'm crazy." He's like, "I'm gonna tell you something. We get these calls all the time around here, so don't be embarrassed."
Interesting.
We get calls for shut up people all the time. And then, obviously we didn't have access to the property.
Right.
We thought we were going to at some point years ago, but it never quite happened. And for those who don't know Robert Bigelow, which the guy was on 60 Minutes, incidentally, a few months ago. It's the guy that made the announcement on 60 Minutes that aliens are real.
Aliens are real.
Yeah, he provides. He works with he works with NASA and the NSA, and he provides like satellite equipment and all that. And Bigelow owned the ranch at some point, but he sold it recently. But anyway, when we were there, nobody actually lived there anymore because we had staked it out for 4 days. But they still have a full-time guard, and especially at night, he's got a guard with 2 dogs, which I know he had 2 dogs because he'd released the dogs on me at some point on public land outside the rancher's property.
Oh,
he let the dogs out, and they came running after me. Yeah, they were just, they weren't like, big like guard dogs or anything, but, and like they're on the side and they're really quiet. And also, I'm just trying to take pictures of the ranch, and he turned on the floodlights, and he's like, "Who's there? What do you want?" And next thing I know, I hear all this barking. His dogs come around the corner, and I can hear Steve yelling, "Get back in the car! Get back in the car!" I'm like, "No, I want to take pictures of the dogs." So I'm trying to take pictures of the dogs, which, with the floodlight in my face, it wasn't going to happen. So eventually I run back into the car, and just as it was like a movie, as I slammed the door, one of the dogs come off on the side, scratching on the side of the door,
Holy crap.
But so there's still a lot of security there. But literally, for 4 days that we were there, everybody that we talked to had seen something.
Right.
And not just like, light in the sky. We're talking about, UFO up close, or one kid we met at the gas station claimed that he was near the entrance of the ranch, and it was kind of like it was a dare for a lot of high school kids to go by the ranch, see how close they could get to it.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point he said he saw these they're called hellhounds in England. It's like a ghost dog phenomenon where they're kind of like black dogs with like in red eyes, at least that's how they're described. And generally you don't get those sightings up here in the U.S. But he said he just saw them. And, of course, maybe he got freaked out. He actually saw just the regular dogs, but he said they were floating, coming straight at him. And they all ran back in the car, and they kind of turned around, and, they peeled out of there. And they looked back, and the dogs weren't there anymore. So it was stories like that for 4 days, just constantly.
That's insane.
And my main, what I really wanted to see there is going back to, we were talking about the dog man and Wahila and all that. There's a giant white wolf that people were seeing on the property. which what I was kind of hoping to see. But we didn't really. All we saw was like one weird light that kind of go up, that kind of took off from the ground and kind of went straight up past the trees. But that, who knows what that was?
Was that like an orb or something?
Yeah, I mean, at first I thought it was a flashlight, but it looked kind of a solid. It just kind of went straight up. And, maybe I don't know, it could have been a weird effect from one of the flashlights. Because the guards are there all night, but they keep the lights off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the only time you see flashlights in the forest once in a while, which I'm guessing is, probably the guard's going to, like, use the restroom or something else, on one of the trees. And, they used to have a lot more guards with dogs, but a lot of dogs are allegedly getting killed on the property, so they don't really have German Shepherds anymore. So, I think they only have 2 guard dogs, I guess, right at the entrance right there, from what I could gather,
Right. And I want to make sure the listeners are not getting this confused with Stardust Ranch.
No, please don't. Stardust Ranch is where it's getting sold for $5 million, I guess, this week. That's the dude that claims to have killed 18 aliens with a samurai sword. So,
one hell of a samurai sword.
Hey, that's like White Blade right there.
Go.
That's what I'm calling it. I don't know what his name is, but I wouldn't put too much stock in that story.
That's a lot of money, $5 million.
Well, I think that's part of the reason the guy, he's coming up with all these crazy stories. Maybe he's thinking that, hey, maybe Robert Bigelow's going to buy my ranch too now, And who knows, maybe they've had some activity, something weird to begin with, but, if you were for me to bet on whether he's killed 18 aliens with a katana, I'm probably going to say probably not. I mean, unless he's Wesley Snipes, I doubt it. But
Blade.
White Blade, I'm calling the guy. Yeah, no, it's crazy, but
that's funny.
Yeah, but see, the problem with those stories, though, is people in the general population are hear those stories, and they can't really, unless you really look into them, you can't really tell the difference between that and Skinwalker or this other ranch. There's another ranch in Sedona that's had a lot of activity that I investigated years ago. Everything gets mixed up, and, that's the problem with crazy stories. I used to think they were funny, too. And, 18 katanas, 18 aliens, that's pretty funny. But it does do harm to the field, ultimately,
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot of stuff out there that's doing that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's not just places, it's people.
Yeah.
But,
Just so we're clear, though, I'm not the one claiming I killed 18 aliens with a samurai sword.
Not.
I don't want that story to get mixed up.
No, absolutely not. We know, Alex. It's all. Thank God. Oh man. So besides going to Russia and Saudi Arabia, what are the more prominent places do you think you'll go to next?
I don't know. I'd like to go back to Skinwalker. I really would.
Mm-hmm.
I was in talk with some guys about doing a Bigfoot thing, but at the near Oklahoma, Texas border, in that area,
mm-hmm.
which I think is, not a lot of people talk about it, but I think it's one of the prime areas for Bigfoot sightings in the United States. I've been, there's that. I've been really pushing Steve and Upars to pay for a trip to Nepal.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have we found eventually we're going to have an interview and we'll make it available, but we found there's a guide. She lives right here in Sacramento, or right here, it's, like 10 hours from LA, but in California. And she's a guide out in Tibet, not in Tibet, in Nepal. And she claims that one day she kind of came around the corner and she came face to face with a Yeti.
Whoa. Oh my gosh. And lived to tell about it.
Yeah. Yeah, apparently, so I haven't had a chance to really talk to her yet. Steve has talked to her on the phone. But having someone who's had a sighting in a particular area, someone that's also a guide up there, it to me seemed like such a good opportunity to get something going. The Yeti being one of my first loves. And you don't get a whole lot of research up there anymore, I think, I had a conversation with Peter Burns. years ago, which was he was the guy that led one of the Tom Slick expeditions back in the 60s and 70s. He's the gentleman that brought back the finger, the fabled Yeti finger. I don't know who's familiar with that story years ago that eventually was stolen. But anyway, he thinks it might be going extinct at this point. And this was already, I mean, I met with him, I don't know, like 12 years ago, something like that, you know. So I think their habitat is definitely probably shrinking a little bit, and the population at some point is retreating more and more deeper, you know, in the forest and that. So, and that's one of my main motivations too, is I like to get to these things before they're gone, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
And you know, there's a big. I realize it's kind of like a philosophical like duality here. I get this question all the time, like, well, aren't you going to be doing more harm by having the species if you discover them? Because I'm arrogant enough to think that I can. You know, are you going to do more harm and not leaving them alone? But I think with the world being what it is, and, you know, the extinction rate being what it is, if you don't start protecting these species at some point, I think they'll be gone before we know anything about them. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, I know. I totally believe. I know where you're coming from. You know, and I always hear about our oceans. Everyone's so, you know, crazy about going out to space, but yet we still don't know, you know, a whole lot about our oceans water. What do you?
Yeah, we export 2%.
Yeah, well,
right, really, of the oceans.
Yeah, what do you think is down there, man? I mean,
Everything.
I mean, you've written about sea serpents, you know, of course. So do you believe that there might be some other stuff down there that we don't know about?
100%. It's almost impossible that there isn't. There's just, I mean, we discover new species all the time, you know. But you know, the problem is that, you know, they get labeled sea monsters, but in reality, what are we talking about? We're talking about maybe, you know, new species of, or primitive species of whales, or, you know, long-necked seals, or, you know, a giant shark, for example. They're not monsters. They're just variations on the theme of animals that already exist.
Yeah, you've written about sharks in your book.
Yeah, but, you know, well, yeah, there's been a lot of stories about Megalodon, right? Still being around. And there's even well, the problem, too, with Megalodon is they had this documentary that aired, I forgot what cable was on last year, and the whole thing was completely bogus about Megalodon sightings and all that. The thing is, because Megalodon is famous, any type of giant shark sighting, people label it Megalodon, right? Which it doesn't necessarily have to be. It can be completely another unknown shark, right? But in the South Pacific, there's an animal they call Lord of the Deep, and it's a shark people have been seeing on and on since, like, you know, I know some sightings dating back to 1918. I mean, you hear stories anywhere between 50 feet to 100 feet, which is probably exaggerated on the 100-foot side, but you're still dealing with an awfully big animal. And there's plenty of, you know, obviously, as we know, there's plenty of room.
Yeah,
I mean, I guarantee there's large animals out there in the ocean, for sure.
What do you think about the talk? I mean, recently I've been seeing a lot of people talking about, like, maybe the possibility of mer people, like mermaid people.
Yeah, it's been a lot of talk, but part of that talk is because of that fake documentary that also aired that had millions of viewers about a couple of years ago. And, you know, it claimed, you know, it was all fake. It was all like actors that claimed to be scientists and all that. Now, that said, going back to what I was talking about in Siberia, there are stories in lakes in Siberia, and usually in lakes that have UFO activity, of what the Russians used to call the swimmers, which is this kind of like these large, you know, I hate to use the word mermaid because it sounds ridiculous, but essentially that's what it was. Just, you know,
right.
I mean, you know, I'm not saying Ariel's down there, you know, singing with a crab, but yeah, no, there's a lot, you know, there's a lot of stories, a lot of sightings in these lakes of these swimmers. And there's a story about some Russian military that was running exercises down there, and they came across them, and a couple of guys, in fact, died from the encounter. So
well, I mean, you know, there's still a possibility of underwater civilizations. I mean, you know, there's still talk about Atlantis and stuff.
Well, Atlantis is interesting to me. I always think more of it as a culture than a specific area.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's no doubt there's commonalities between architecture, basic root language all around the world that you sort of have to explain on some level, you know? I think the evidence for an advanced civilization in the past is becoming greater, you know, as we make more discoveries. We keep pushing everything back, discoveries back, right? They keep just, you know, finding new sites that are older and older and older. But, you know, and again, if you look at, you know, a lot of the languages, there's definitely commonalities in some of the roots. And obviously, you know, we all know about the architecture, right? I mean, you have, you know, from the pyramid, I mean, could be even using simplistic example from the pyramids in Egypt to China. China has pyramids, to South America. You know, I mean, some of the way that things are built, the way, you know, there's too many similarities not to have had a link, you know, back in antiquity that we're not aware of. And I think, to me, that's Atlantis. And sure, I'm sure, you know, maybe there was a specific area called Atlantis or whatever, like, you know, like Plato said, but
right.
I think we need to start looking at it as a form as a, you know, as a culture that influenced the rest of the world.
Very, very well said. And I totally agree with you. I believe you on that. Man, it is time to end the show, Alex. I knew it was going to happen. We had so much more to cover. Just means you have to come back again. Where can we find your info again for the audience?
Yeah, for my book, you can go to thepresencebook.com, which is my website. It's a website for the book. I have some blogs, articles on there that really need to be updated, but some of the stuff's pretty good. If not, mainly it's just Facebook. I post stuff all the time. So yeah, that's pretty much right now the only two places to find me, or UPARS at Facebook as well. I post a lot of stuff on there.
Right on, and you do post quite a few interesting articles. All of them are interesting, as a matter of fact, and some great pictures as well. And I would definitely direct everyone to go there. Alex, thanks again, man. You got a great book. Again, you guys definitely need to go out to Amazon and check it out. The Presence. You'll love it. And Alex, thanks again for being on the show, man.
No, thank you very much. I really appreciate you inviting me, and I appreciate people listening.
Absolutely, man. Just hang on a bit, and I'll get to you right after the show.
Okay, cool.
All right, everyone. That pretty much wraps it up. Thanks again, Alex Mistretta. Remember, the book is The Presence, and you can find it on Amazon, An Exploration into the Paranormal. Definitely go out there, check it out. Christmas is coming. Get it. Use it as stocking stuffer. And tell a friend. Once again, I'd like to thank our guest, Alex Mistretta, for being on the show. Remember to tune in tomorrow, Elizabeth Anglin, for Psychic Sundays, Spaced Out Radio's Cosmic Passport, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. You can also catch me, Dave Cruz, on Beyond Strange Radio, and that will be 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Remember, everyone, stay safe, have a good night, and as always, stay spacey. Hasta. Have a good night.
When the clouds keep building up, they suffocate my brain. I built them to destroy myself. They're circling the prey. I push until I break. I feel them start to scrape. The core of all I am is chiseling away. And every speck of life is gonna rot away in time. We touch a metal, touch a stone, it's a grand design. Amazing petrified hearts and I'm lost inside. We all self-destruct, love is to deny. And that is life. And the clocks, they never stop. turn me